Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Friday, February 21st, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Have a lot to get to today. Got to jump right into it, give you a very quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to definitely start right into it and get to the Bibas conversation, what's going on with the Israeli-Gaza ceasefire, and what we expected. I mean, legitimately exactly what we predicted, even at a time before we had all of the information fleshed out. And we were clear. This is what we expected based on that information. As it went forward, continue to tell you what we expected, what happened, how they tried to return the bodies, and now where we are. And I think it's important that we understand the big picture and how it's being abused, and as well as the fact that it was definitely a crime that the children were taken to begin with. Now, from there, we're going to make sure we get into the overlapping parts around that in regard to Israel, Gaza, and the ceasefire conversation that are relevant. But I think what overlaps, actually, I'm realizing I mixed these up. We're going to start actually with, because I stood back and I realized that there's a lot of not just deception happening right now, but with Tel Aviv and what I see developing as a quite obvious false flag carried out by settlers. That's what the evidence suggests to me at the moment. Robert's doing an investigation. We see that happening simultaneously while we have this Betar USA group creating all this chaos in the United States. We got just different elements of this. The Patriot Front overlap, a video that recently came out that was basically what most independent media had already realized, a video of a police officer basically facilitating the Patriot Front along through the U-Hauls that we've already caught them. Very important to see. And I see this is all interconnected. I'll let you decide for yourself, but seeing kind of the way that we're being manipulated, whether through false flags or staged events, which are different, and we'll go into how this all overlaps. The main thing in Tel Aviv, Robert is investigating at the moment, is these bus bombings. That's what we're going to talk about, and then we'll get into the Bibas conversation as this all interconnects. People are arguing this might have very well been carried out to distract from that very obvious imploding story. Just people's speculation. But what it appears to be already is Israeli settlers that have been picked up in involvement in all this. But again, we'll get to the facts. You guys can decide for yourselves, but it's important to see how this has already been developing. Robert seems pretty set, or rather just based on his opinion of the facts at the moment, are that this very clearly feels like a manipulation. We're going to make sure we talk about the points that interconnect with this, I think, around the Bibas family conversation. Shireen Abu Akleh, for example, and different points that make sense that I want you guys to see. A very important part of the show today is going to be about DOGE and spending and just an unbelievable amount of lies. Whether it's the Gaza rapper story that Robert completely tore apart, even though they're still claiming that, or the Gaza condom story, or the different ones we've already talked about. But just going through the funding itself and showing you how clearly this is not what they're claiming. Even now that we do have some of the receipts, and we'll show you what that looks like on the website, I'm finding them that they're claiming are deleted that are actually now continuing to be funded. We'll go through all of that. And again, not to get too much to start, we'll leave it there, but I might get to I have a huge section that I want to follow up on regarding the bird flu and a few others. And I will be eventually, probably not today, get to the concept of Mexico and the terrorist designation for the criminal gangs, which doesn't matter how bad those gangs are, and they're some of the worst. It's not a terrorist organization, and there's a reason those things are different, but we'll talk about that as it relates to Musk claiming they can now drone bomb Mexico in the next show tomorrow. That's when we're going to be discussing it, as well as the bird flu part today at the end of the show, if we don't get to it. But very important to hear out of the gate, guys. The current Trump administration is not just going in the mRNA direction, mRNA. They are funding many different examples of mRNA technology. One for a powder aerosol version. I mean, this is all study research stuff, but it's being funded by the current administration. I'll show that on the USA spending website. But a lot of other things, including things you might argue are woke. Climate change related spending still happening through this government. Now, I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying it's incredible to see the blinders that people put on when they want to believe something's happening, when the evidence shows you quite a different story. But let's start today with the opening point that I wanted to reference that I just thought was interesting. Patrick Henningsen shares this, and it's really just kind of the larger deception that we're dealing with here. And a lot of the characters that are kind of grifting along with it, including other heads of state. You already heard about this in regard to the cryptocurrency scam that was carried out through Malay, sort of like the similar pump and dumps of Trump and Melania and the rest of these that are, people lost a lot of money and they made a lot. Now, people make their own choices, but nonetheless, it's important to highlight that this is something that's very inherently deceptive. In this case, Patrick's simply pointing out, basically, Malay is saying, what's the problem? If I didn't do this crypto scam, then somebody else would have. Sounds pretty familiar. I'm sure you know where we're going. His statement is obvious. It's an interesting thought. And obviously the overlap between the different people we're discussing is very clear with Malay and the United States and Israel and plenty of others. But it's incredible to think that you can be caught, and I mean literally caught, with an obvious pump and dump scam, and that's your response? And I think these people feel like they have a lot of support right now in this kind of lawless, we're right because we're powerful, at least we present that way, mindset. As if the law, literally Machiavellian mindset of just, well, the ends justify the means. So who cares as long as we claim we got to a place where we told you we wanted to go, even if we didn't actually get there or it's not even happening. Nonetheless, it's kind of crazy that this gets dismissed. Now, I want to start with the point about psychological operations, particularly about the Patriot Front. Many argue is just an FBI melodrama, and I kind of agree. And I think there's a lot of obvious overlaps, but what I want to show you in this, or just reference again, is that it's not just an FBI overlap. Let's not forget that the Patriot, or the Rise Above movement, the group that was marching through Charlottesville that kind of became the impetus for this whole right-wing Nazi overlap and the "you will not replace us" and even the cars hitting protesters, all came from that big surge right there. The Rise Above movement, if you haven't heard me say this 150 times before, is without question on the record, is the United States arm of the Azov movement in Ukraine. Now, actually, this will probably pop up as I usually grab. It's one from the accounts I used before. Here we go. And I'll just include this. I won't even go over it again. I've gone over so many times. The evidence is all here. All the links included to the FBI, to Newsweek articles, writing about all these different things, citing U.S. entities and so on about how this is the case. They knew these people were Nazis. They knew that they'd been training them, and that they knew that they were the U.S. arm marching through Charlottesville of the Azov movement that they were calling Nazi at the time, mind you. And then, of course, don't miss the fact that we can prove that Israel had been funding them well before that. So would the United States. So the point in showing you all that is, if we need to see how this Ukraine dynamic has been used, the argument to try to blame it on Russia before that kind of imploded, they just went in a different direction. The reality of this is that group was funded by the CIA in Israel. The extension is quite obvious. To the very same point, so too are the people that you'll see throughout the Patriot Front. People like this guy and plenty of the others. What's the guy behind him? I think it was Skullface or something like. These are prominent characters. You can draw direct lines of funding between these people, the Atomwaffen Division, the base, and the Azov movement, all of which have this interconnected circle of people funding. It's obvious what's happening. Now, it doesn't mean everybody involved with them all know that they're being manipulated, right? There's FBI informants and so on that manipulate things. Who knows what the full extent is? But what we can prove is that these people, all the way down to the groups we're talking about, do have connections to the very same governments that pretend to be fighting this stuff. So all that's to say that I think we're being manipulated. And of course, we're going to get to a second, and really just all these are reiterating small points that I've made a lot in the past, is that the ADL has a shockingly obvious on-the-record history of faking things just like this. One in Skokie, Illinois, we talked about last time, Mordecai Levy. It's all on the record, guys, literally caught as people working for the ADL pretending to be Nazis. Now, we talked about similar things with James Lee in the interview about the ADL literally being a spy organization, which it is. It's very easy to see if you're just not scared away from blatant, random screams of racism that have nothing to do with what we're talking about. But that's the point. I want to show you this today. Now, this has been going around. This is a pretty prominent. I bet you it's at 20,000. Let's see if it's gone up since then. Yeah, 10,000 in a day. So it should be a lot more than that, quite frankly. But let's take a look at this video. Now, remember, we've already seen numerous examples of this, of Patriot Front marches and different groups where they will end up later around the corner being sort of ushered into a U-Haul by the police. I've seen 2 examples on this show before this. Here's another one. But this one's different because of the way they're engaging. Now, you could argue it's just a cop being kind to people. It feels a bit weird in the context, but also my gut is that's not what you're looking at. The way that they discuss these things, the way that they sort of take off the mask, not even literally, they do that too, after they get away from everybody. And this is a body cam, mind you. I don't think he knew this would get out. So take a look and remember that this is, whether it's the FBI or ADL or all of it together, just consider how many different ways we are being played and who benefits from stuff like this. very, really main entities today that you can see more than anybody. The group that are calling to censor anti-Semitism, because that's what they're mainly getting into now, even though before it was more broad, like this, with their Nazi symbols and all that, as well as the group that are trying to control your speech, both of which have a means to an end. Let's watch this.
News tonight. New video just released by Evendale Police shows the moments an officer interacted with a neo-Nazi group after that demonstration over 75 near Lincoln Heights.
There's been a lot of discussion, obviously, about this incident since it happened 11 days ago on February 7th. So you're about to see the officer on the overpass first ordering the white supremacist group to get into the U-Haul and leave the bridge when counter-protesters then arrive. So about 5 minutes later, you could see the same officer walk up to the U-Haul outside of a Lockland local schools building shortly before kids were about to be released from class that day.
So right there, how exactly do you make sense of that? That they end up meeting up later somewhere else? I mean, you can really, I mean, it's important to be objective. And I mean, even in these kind of senses, since we don't really know the benefit of the doubt, right? Not assume, but just give that possibility. To me, that's obvious that you're, so it's an impromptu thing that you just happen to be the police officer on duty, and and then even ushering them into the thing seems a bit weird, right? But then you meet them somewhere else. I mean, to me, there's only a few possibilities. Either he's a part of this group, that's certainly possible, right? Or he's been given orders to do this and doesn't know why, or it's something larger that we're talking about. I mean, I'm sure we could think of something else as well. But the point is, obviously, there's something other than just a police officer being helpful, in my opinion.
Here's the exchange now between the Evendale officer and the neo-Nazi group in the U-Haul, and the one man not wearing a mask you're about to see asking if he can go back and pick up his service dog where the protest happened on the overpass on 75.
We're trying to figure out a plan to get that.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got to get him an Uber or something. That's probably the best bet, I'm guessing. I don't think anybody knows about
There's a dog. If the dog in there is cool,
So note really quickly that these guys are talking about this before they let them out of the back. I mean, that is the driver, but you have to realize that means they've communicated about this before they got here. Seems interesting.
Dog is in there is cool with me driving it to you guys.
and I don't think anybody knows about
There's a dog. If the dog in there is cool with, if the dog is in there is cool with me driving it to you guys, I can go and get it. But there's a dog in there. I don't know.
Yeah, we need to get him. He's my service animal. That's why I really need to get him. But
Get your mask on. Let's go. Here.
Get your mask on. Let's go. I don't give a my face right now.
Just.
Isn't it funny, though? He's my service animal. I'm going to get, just this difference from marching, we're going to kill the Jews, like this crazy, it just feels like a show, doesn't it? Feels odd. Doesn't mean that people who have disgusting beliefs can't be normal people, but certainly feels like a bit of a difference between what you see them with their marching, militaristic, to this weird kind of difference to just like, now we're off stage.
Just take that black that shirt off, and you can get my car.
Cool, thank you, brother.
And then
God bless you, dude.
if I got in the driver's seat of the car, would the dog bite me, you think? No. Okay.
No, he's a good dog. He'll sniff you to death.
Why would he have to take the black shirt off? Is it illegal to wear a black shirt? There's only a couple possibilities. Either that's important because you don't want us we don't want to be seen working together, or two, it's uncomfortable because maybe then they'll see this and I shouldn't be doing it. Well, either way, seems pretty odd.
You make sure you got your keys.
Hey, officer, did you see
Hey,
yeah, I got the.
you guys are you guys done?
Yeah, we're done.
There's no other.
No, we're just trying to go get the dog and get the Jeep, and then we're out. Yeah, we're gone.
Let's go grab it.
Now, let's also be clear, guys, regardless of whether it's even the Fed, the FBI, or they're just a Nazi group. They all have a right, even the Fed, the FBI, even though they're pretending to be average people, have the right to go out there and protest what they want. Doesn't mean, the point is still, it's interesting the way that the dynamic is going. I'm not saying that we know for sure what this group is based on just this engagement, but with everything else we do know. And my point is the larger point I started with is whether everyone involved in there knows this, that group itself is directly tied through funding and entities connected to it, to the larger network of false Nazi elements.
Yeah, and I was even seeing a comment, dude, we need to leave like forever ago, but
Okay, so the video goes on to show that officer drive back to the original overpass where the demonstration happened. Evendale police just released the video a week after it released footage from several other officers that day. On social media, the village of Evendale saying, quote, there is a significant amount of misinformation circulating on social media regarding the actions of Evendale officers on February 7th. We're uploading the body camera footage of every officer who responded on February 7th so that you can see the actions of our officers with your own eyes. We have a link to that on our website. Go to WLWT.com. We will link you to all of that footage if you'd like to see more.
Well, we looked at it. You tell me. I don't feel like that assuages anybody's concerns, quite frankly. But interesting. Overall, the main point here is that the interconnection between these people that are part of this group that were just looked at are tied back to the same CIA Israeli network of false marches that we've seen before. Azov movement specifically. Now here's that same group. Armed Ohio neo-Nazis waving swastika flags target drag event again. So just a general point. It's not like it's inconsistent for something like this to be targeted. But just ask yourself, if we're talking about some massive group if you listen to them, their main focus is about the racial dynamic, which is again what Israel and the rest of them are really, that's kind of the argument. They hate the Jewish people. They're going after, and which, by the way, wouldn't that all be Muslims? But you rarely hear that with this, which I think is very telling. But also, my point in the general sense is, it seems they're overwhelming. They're trying to get you focused as always. And I'm just not even talking about this in general, but as the propaganda I keep seeing today on woke ideology, DEI, fighting the drag queen story. All of those things matter. But ask yourself why this group would continually make their focal point something like that. It doesn't seem like a very ideologically important dynamic when you realize with what their overarching points are. Just an observation. I guess you know where I'm coming from with this. I believe that this is the framing of a lot of this to get you over-focused on very specific parts of the story. Worth considering. Now, I'll include all the past conversations we've had, or many of them. June 12th, the Patriot Front, January 6th, and Vanilla ISIS PSYOP. This was one of the examples, by the way. In here is a clip to them getting into a U-Haul being ushered in by the police. That was 2022, here's 2023, the Azov Patriot Front agenda. And that's, again, right there. I could go through all this again. I'd rather get into much more, current stuff. The point is, it's all right there. All the receipts. You can see the connection between the two and realize that you're being used by the same people trying to make America fight itself at this point, it seems. CIA is creating, fostering, and seeding neo-Nazi extremists into the U.S. And this is going back in a long way, like whether it's the FBI creating terrorist, faking events essentially to frame people for things they didn't do, or the overlapping dynamic of Mossad and the different aspect of what they're carrying out. All of this stuff these aren't opinions, guys. This is stuff that you can look at going back, which I'll show you some in a second. This is an interesting one from 2018 from the Free Thought Project. New federal bill targets patriot groups and citizen militias as domestic terrorists. So you can see in this case a kind of problem reaction solution within the United States. Now, I argue there are larger agendas coming from other countries, but specifically your government has always had an interest in using your own patriotism against you. That's why they say if you believe, quote, too much in the Constitution, you're considered a terrorist. Like, that's not my opinion. That's going back to, I think Lou Kradowski forever ago broke that down from the government's own information. And they don't use the word terrorist. I think they used a threat, domestic threat. The Constitution? Yes. There's a reason they're trying to undermine this everywhere they are. So in this case, they're using these fake events with their allies to get you framed as that. Seems pretty simple. And you see it happening. How quickly we forget red hat equals terrorist. And that wasn't just the left, mind you guys, or that you're an anti-Semite because you're at a truck rally. Over and over and over, the same things are applied to you. You should be able to recognize how it's being used against you right now. Now, this was the one we've talked about before. Zionism versus Nazism and the interconnection there, Israel's connection to extremist ideology, and them faking their marches, which is the point for today. Now, I'll include some of these directly from that show, but just recognize the legacy of the would-be Nazi march in the town of Holocaust survivors. This is the mainstream coverage of it, which mentions all the same names, and you can connect those dots very clearly with the other parts of the story, primarily being ADL provocateurs at work inciting Nazi rallies, mentioning Mordecai Levy, who, by the way, they literally mention in both these mainstream stories, and you can connect the dots for yourself. This person is not Mordecai Levy. His name is James Gutman, as the alias anyway. And or rather, that's what he's pretending to be. And then Mordecai Levy is his actual name. I mean, it's very easy to see all of this. All this was used to create, led to this very day, to argue for censorship against what you're allowed to say out loud. And then this interview with James Lee, much worth your time, because that's what this group is doing. Literally, that's framing pro-Palestinian content as Nazi marches, or rather not Nazi marches, but racism. And then using that to go after anybody they don't like. And your government is leading that charge right now. Now, Mike Lee simply says, I hope Kash Patel, who was recently confirmed, fires the Patriot Front wing of the FBI before tomorrow morning. Okay. Well, here we are. All right. That was the 20th. This is the 21st. So what are we to read from this? Now, first of all, obviously, I think the game is that's the, no, I'm not saying that we're proving that is the FBI. I wouldn't argue that, because I don't think we have. I think the evidence is very clear that it's a manipulation. But is he claiming that he knows it's the FBI? Okay, maybe not. But so then what happens if Patel doesn't do anything? A week goes by, a year goes by, and nothing changes. Does that mean he is okay with the Patriot Front lie, part of the FBI? Or was this all a joke in the first place? Then why'd Mike Lee say that? Right? You could look at it either way. I think these people are interested in keeping you along. It's about creating the picture of change, even though not much is really moving. But I think it's important to recognize that I do think this is happening, and I do think the FBI is a part of this, like anybody with a brain can see, going back. Even the corporate media has covered this. Intercept did a great job breaking down manufacturing terrorist events. That's not one part of the other, guys. That's just your government. And as long as you keep trying to slice it down the middle, you'll never actually change it. So maybe this is, just basically trying to create the idea that now he's there, therefore it's now changed, even though there's no evidence to back that up. Sort of like everything else they're putting forward. But just in case you were confused about what he's really fighting for, here's Dr. Simon Godek. Cash says, we need America to wake up and prioritize Israel. That's a direct quote. But yeah, let's keep talking about America first, right? He says, meanwhile, MAGA on X, we're so back. Since when did MAGA become cheerleaders for a foreign ethno-state while America rots from the inside? I'd say this is somebody who was aligned with the MAGA right-wing conversation during COVID-19, like a lot of us were, that were just being honest, because they were suddenly seeing that truth, who now have shifted away. And he remains with integrity, saying, well, that's not okay. They're murdering people. Or the fact that they're just blindly in supporting the government. Now, just because you have your people where you think they should be does not mean that you should just then stop challenging the government. Are we still pretending like the Trump team is some kind of rebel force still fighting for power? They are the government. So yes, just because, let's just even say that everything you think about them is true, and they win, and oh my God, it's going to be great now. You still question them. You still hope, because they could be wrong, right? What if he's being played? This is just basic logic, and you all know this. The sad part is that that's not what's happening. They're just basically blindly supporting, and I think that's the minority, but it's enough people. Here's what he had to say.
We will shut off the machinery that feeds money into Iran. We will no longer have 100 hostages still in captivity, Israeli and American and otherwise, by Hamas and Iran's Hezbollah mercenary forces. We need America to wake up and prioritize Israel and bring home Israelis and make sure we stand by our #1 ally in Israel.
Yeah. Well, is that what you want? America first? Prioritize Israel? Those things are counterintuitive. I'm sure you'll find some way to mental gymnastics that into making sense, but reality for anybody that cares about the truth is that is not America first. High Impact Flicks makes this clear when he says, I can't remember when so many gun-owning Americans who call themselves conservatives were so trusting of the government. It's like they've just let their guard down and they're sitting there trusting the plan, like pulling a lever behind a curtain magically solved everything. I don't know how you can pretend that this was some kind of a fight of the deep state when it went through the normal channels, right? Like you vote on it. Like that's how you beat the deep state. You vote for it, right? If you really believe the deep state is what we claim it is, why would they ever allow that? It's just so childishly naive. But I don't think most people even believe that. I think that's the picture they're being presented with. But as this person says, MAGA be like, and it says, taxation is not theft. I love state power. Government force is cool when I support the person in charge. It's exactly what some of the team sport Republicans are doing. Now, in other context of this or other situations or aspects of it, remember, we have this happening all over the place. This is the United States. Different marches, different false flags. I mean, this is constantly happening. There's always a battle to can manipulate the way you see the world, whether it's on social media or in real life. Another example of this, though, that I think connects this back to where I think this is truly stemming from is a group we've already covered twice now. This Betar USA group, and this perfectly connects with the whole dystopian technocratic world they're pushing forward, or at least it seems this group is abusing that direction for their own personal benefit. But this is a group that is now, and again, Breaking 911 and a few others have recently, I think they're all basically guilty of it, but that I've seen these people just blindly repeat what was stated by people on a very clear partisan side. So, I mean, look, you're watching right now in this show especially, you already know, whether it's Breaking 911, Decensored News, Discord TV, and those are very different platforms, some of which I much appreciate. But if you just blindly take it at face value without looking, then you're the problem, right? You should be doing your due diligence because these platforms, a lot of them just pump out whatever they heard last. Some of them, like, for example, Decensored News and some of the others that I appreciate, do their due diligence first. But we can all make mistakes. The point is that I saw this come out or a few others where it goes, really? Yeah, you just shared that without any due diligence, and I can prove that's false. And I can prove that it would have taken you half a second to find out for yourself. Just recognize that, guys. There's a lot of that happening, like this. Breaking. Palestinians, first of all, attacking Jews in New York City. I mean, Palestinians. Okay, so did you check their passports? Are you aware that they're, first of all, we're not talking about Palestinians in this conversation. It says, despite a ceasefire, Palestinians are currently violently protesting and attacking Jews in the heart of, so that's ridiculous framing. Oh, so I didn't know the ceasefire extended out to New York City. I mean, really, that was a lazy argument. Now, bottom line is, to cut to the chase, that's not even remotely what happened. And you can look on the videos for yourself because, of course, you get this selectively cut video that shows part of the story. And just to be clear, we've already covered the incredibly abrasive, dishonest actions of this group, from dropping pagers in people's pockets, which are American citizens, not Palestinian Americans, but random white American people in school. Not that their color should matter, but just to make that clear for people who want to pretend that they're only going after people with different color skin. The bottom line is, Americans in colleges, these people are going up and putting pagers next to them and saying, or threatening to deport them when they're American citizens. Not here on visas, but American citizens. Again, not that should matter anymore to you because you should care about people. But recognize that they're abusing the situation and going after anybody that supports Palestine and calling for them to be deported, reaching out to ICE and trying to get them deported, and in some cases, having things happen. And they're the ones going out and attacking and instigating, and we've proven it already. In 3 different examples, you can see them. We've covered this twice already. The first one went over a 2-day process, and they were actively being violent, sabotaging the events in order to create the very thing they point to. This is a false flag, guys. That's what they're doing. Says Press News, says, nope, it's false. The truth is the Zionist organization, Betar USA, which has been threatening pro-Palestinian activists for months and been roundly documented, has now begun physically attacking pro-Palestinian protesters, not Palestinians. We see they're trying to do it like that, or at least Breaking 911 is taking note of that, chose to flavor it this way, which shows you a very clear, ignorant, lacking of insight, and partisan framing of a group that's supposed to be just news reports, like a news wire. So just don't forget that. Here is another response from Gen X Girl saying wrong. Same kind of dynamic with a different post. But here's earlier, Betar USA. Here's what it says. And realize these are Americans protesting for human life, essentially. And you can look at the actual larger protest for yourself. We're talking about people protesting for the ceasefire and the end of conflict. And here's what this tweet says. Hamas US is coming to attack Brooklyn. Oh, they're coming to attack Brooklyn? I mean, see, if you're ignorant, you'll fall for something like that. But there are people like that maybe don't know any better, that somehow think these people, and then you rationalize violence. You get other people to do it for you. It says, we urge, and realize, isn't this calling for violence? Well, no, because they are calling for violence against Hamas, right? It's very simple to see how Twitter plays this game. If you want to pretend that instigating violence is a violation of your terms of service, well, it's this account. Take a quick look for yourself. It's all across their account. Walking up to Norm Finkelstein and putting a pager in his pocket is a threat, despite how you want to frame it. If you're going to pretend that saying from the river to the sea is genocide, then I'm pretty sure putting a pretend bomb in someone's pocket is a threat. But it says, we urge everyone to bring dogs, borrow a pit bull. Feel free to mask up and wear a helmet. Jihadis are coming to attack synagogues. How will you react? That is how they're framing people protesting peacefully for a ceasefire. They come out and start beating people up with the expectation of violence. It's very easy to see. And then Janice Girl goes back and frames how Eric Adams and the rest are, again, typical bipartisan support for all of this. Show you how they've allowed this to happen. And it goes through a lot. And here this shows Betar flying the I think it's Kahan Chai flag in the protest, Brooklyn, New York, who, by the way, is a designated terrorist organization in the United States. But nobody cares, right? Because that's an Israel thing. So we pretend it's not there. Here is a great article from The Intercept. The far-right group building a list of pro-Palestine activists to deport. This is from February 6th. Betar USA said it has shared with the Trump administration a list of the names of hundreds of terror supporters. Now, do you think they're going to be, think about this, in the context of deportation, how is that going, by the way? I'm starting to get the sense that's not even going to happen at all, which is what a lot of us predicted, that it was all, but not that they wouldn't surprise me, but it was a huge undertaking with a lot of resources that we expelled. And now we're going to be, now we drift into some AI and different things and we just stop talking about it. But we'll see. I'm not going to predict that because it could go either way. The point, though, is that you can see the overlap. Whether it's the border conversation and deporting people they claim shouldn't be here, or the idea of pro-Palestinian people with visas that, by the way, all of which are protected under the Constitution, so it's wildly unconstitutional to do any of that. Names of hundreds of terror supporters. But that's all going on. Do you think they're going to start? I mean, we've already seen them arrest a veteran and refuse to acknowledge that he was actually a veteran until after the case was over, because he was in the room with a bunch of brown people. They're not checking this stuff, and we can already see that in multiple examples. So how long until Americans who support Palestine suddenly get caught up in the mix because a Israeli group lied? Big surprise. This, by the way, is the guy that seems to be fronting all of this, and at least the videos I'm seeing, constantly in front of all of it. Oh, I think it was just the top I highlighted. Here is a report from within that. ICE wants to know, and you guys have already seen this, by the way, if you're posting negative things about it online. ICE wants to hire contractors to monitor social media for threats. Those who criticize the agency could be pulled into the dragnet. Really? Here's what it says. Citing an increase to threats to ICE agents and leadership, the agency is soliciting pitches from private companies to monitor threats across the internet. Gee, I can only wonder which ones they'll tap into. The Israeli intelligence ones or the Palantir ones, or which are both, essentially. I mean, guys, you know where this is going. They're tapping. What companies do you think are doing? There's a very clear few names out there that are stepping up. I think this is a problem, reaction, solution dynamic. And what do you think they're going to go after? They're going to go after your speech, which I think the important part about this, guys, is this is all under the guise that you're saying things that are related somehow to race or to anti-Semitism, right? Let me show you a clip, actually, that I wasn't going to include. I think it's important right here, and we're going to probably go over this next show as well. Now, this is Yacarino speaking about giving up your information. And I'm sure you won't be surprised.
At the company, it was the first global happening where we had to activate a crisis protocol
October
at
7th.
the company. And it was a time where we all came together as a new company and realized how consequential it became to combat anti-Semitism on the platform. And that things we were doing, things we had to newly do, learn, work with law enforcement all over the world, work with military all over the world, work with a variety of organizations to protect Jewish people on that awful day. We learned how important it was for X to set the example for many to follow. So that was a really big deal.
All right. So just again, to reiterate the same old point, combating anti-Semitism is a violation of your free speech, period. Now, look, that if they don't want to call themselves a free speech platform, then they can say that's fine. We are fighting for this because we think it's right, and we're going to be a limited speech platform. I would almost respect that. Stand by what you believe in. Well, you can't say free speech. Now, as always, someone will try to misrepresent. No one in this conversation who has morals and integrity is trying to say that it's okay to be racist against somebody, but it's your right to be. You're allowed to say what you want and think what you want in a country that pretends to be about free speech and self-determination, as long as you're not violating a law, which you are not, by saying disgusting things or typing. I mean, the bottom line is, guys, that saying that they are fighting anti-Semitism simply means they're stopping you from saying those things. Now, you may agree with that. It doesn't mean it's free speech. On top of that, we already know that they're not just going after anti-Semitism. They're going after all sorts of things under a guise of fighting anti-Semitism. And they're making it very clear. So just be real on this, that they are not a free speech platform if they have been going out of their way, working with militaries and intelligence apparatus all over the world to protect Jews in Israel, which is not even what they're doing. Haaretz just wrote an article that there's no place more unsafe on earth than Israel for Jews. And it's not because of Hamas. That's Haaretz writing that about the Israeli government and what they do to cause that. It's amazing the stuff you can read in Israeli media if you just step out of your bubble in this controlled Israeli Western media proper. It's incredible. Anyway, the point is free speech and how this platform and all the rest, including Meta and all the rest, have been using these stories. In this case, now we're talking about actual real life engagement with ICE, with immigration enforcement. And what they're saying is that they now need to work with a partner to monitor what you say online for real world action. How long until this becomes that real world force that enforces the idea that you're not allowed to say these things? Hope that's not the where it's going, but it sure feels like it, doesn't it? It says in order to prevent adversaries from successfully targeting ICE senior leaders. Oh, so now it's about your immigration people being targeted by foreign governments? How does that even make sense? It only makes sense under the idea that this is we're under some massive threat. I mean, guys, this is about anti-Semitism. That's what they're talking about from some foreign entity. Everything is converging around this one idea. Gee, who benefits from that? It's amazing that we even have to explain all this stuff. Now, I could certainly be wrong, but you know as well as I where all of those arrows point. And it says ICE requires real-time threat mitigation and monitoring services, vulnerability assessments, and protective threat monitoring services. My God. It says if this scanning uncovers anything the agency deems suspicious, not a crime, but suspicious, ICE is asking its contractors to drill down into the background of social media users. So your privacy doesn't matter anymore as long as they feel like you might be worthy of investigation. It's unclear how exactly any contractor might sniff out someone's proclivity for violence. See, this is what Whitney's talked about. This is the pre-crime dynamic that they've been driving in well since before Bill Barr, but under Trump's last administration, it really got a jump. It says the ICE document states only that the contractor will use social and behavioral science and psychological profiles to accomplish its automated threat detection. Once flagged, so you get flagged because you said ICE did a bad job that day, the system will further scour the target's internet history and attempt to reveal their real-world position and offline identity. So your privacy doesn't matter if they just decide to look into you. In addition to compiling personal information, such as the social security numbers and addresses of those whose posts are flagged, the contractor will also provide ICE with a photograph, partial legal name and partial date of birth, possible city, possible work affiliations, possible school and a university affiliation, and any identified possible family members or associates. Now just ask yourself, before we even get into the meat of this in a second, what if that is somebody else benefiting from that? You already can see how this whole dynamic, the whole ICE aspect of it is clearly being driven through something that Israel's driving. We can see all the different elements of this that are completely overtaken by Israel, right down to the entire administration. Elon Musk getting access to cyber dynamics and the IRS and all of this different stuff, and no ethics pledges, no real oversight of any kind. And now we just ask yourself, that's all I want. I'm not for even second claiming that I think for absolute certain that we know this is happening. But if you can't acknowledge the possibility, sure as hell. I mean, I just saw Laura Loomer making another claim. The GOP is overtaken by China. Certainly possible. I'm absolutely willing to consider that. Please present your evidence. But it's amazing how those people are absolutely unwilling to consider the waterfall evidence that shows Israel is doing far, 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 far more. But just think about that. Now, all they have to do is suggest through some post or flag it for ICE that you said a bad thing about some person over here that they claim is anti-Semitic, that it involves what ICE did that day, whatever it is. Then that person, the contract, that whether it's Palantir, the group they're working with, that has all the clear overlaps with what they're doing, whether it's Gaza or anywhere else, and they get all this information, which I'm arguing right now, that's kind of a moot point. It's already, if you're tapped into the source like Elon Musk and the rest, I'm worried that's already long since passed. But it says the document also requests facial recognition capabilities that could take a photograph of a subject and search the internet to find all relevant information associated with the subject. Why does ICE need any of this? This is like FBI level stuff. They're supposed to be working with those agencies to simply enforce immigration. It's just becoming another intelligence apparatus, but that tells you something when you can clearly see what's driving it right now. And it says the contract contains specific directions for targets found in other countries, implying the program would scan the domestic speech of American citizens and apparently into other countries. It says the posting indicates that ICE isn't merely looking to detect direct threats of violence, but also online criticism of the agency. As part of its mission to protect ICE with protective threat monitoring, the winning contractor will not simply flag threatening remarks, but, quote, provide monitoring and analysis of behavioral and social media sentiment. Positive, neutral, negative, sort of sounds like a social credit score. This includes regular updates on the total number of negative references to ICE found in social media. See, if you thought they were just going to come out one day and go, guess what? Here's your digital ID. Here's your credit score. Tough it out. Then you're wrong. Then you're naive. The point is, it was never going to be presented on a table in front of you. It's always going to be a roundabout way to get you looking over there while this rolls out over here, like that. And it says such sentiment analysis, typically accomplished via machine learning techniques, artificial intelligence, could place under law enforcement scrutiny speech that is constitutionally protected. Could? It already is. Simply stated, a post that is critical or even hostile to ICE isn't against the law. Scanning online speech in the name of Homeland Security is a bipartisan initiative. A document soliciting contractors appears nearly identical to a procurement document published by ICE in 2020. The point is, from Trump to Biden to Trump, it's been the same agenda, like everything else we're starting to pay attention to, hoping others can see that. Now, let's find out who that contractor is when that happens. I'm willing to bet you already know a few people will probably be the some way or another, it'll relate back. Now, it says ICE plans to monitor social media for threats against negative comments, was the report from Independent on February 12th. Here's the actual document. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and it says internet-based threat risk mitigation and monitoring services, statement of objectives. I just don't know why we think this makes any sense. This is turning this into something other than what it's meant for. And I think we all know where this is going. And as Hotspot even seemed to pluck out of it all, let's not miss this part.
Number 8, we will finally complete the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system, which we need desperately. For years, Congress has required biometric entry-exit visa tracking systems, but it has never been completed. The politicians are all talk, no action, never. And I will tell you, it will be on land, it will be on sea, it will be in air. We will have a proper tracking system.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's kind of having more, building out to some more context now. ICE wants to hire contractors to monitor social media for threats and throw people in the dragnet for anyone who criticizes the agency. So think of it from different points. They may not even be aware of those different points coming together. Maybe somebody else is puppeteering all of them. The point is, you can see how this all comes together. That's what we've been trying to warn you about. And again, there's so many ways we talk about these things. And so often, of course, we get into different points that I think might be relevant. I'm very clear when it's my opinion, right? But if it's about context, how it contextualize what we see happening. Now, of course, I could just give you the data points and lay it out for people, but I think it's important to show you what I think it comes together as. Especially since we can look back at just the last decade plus of TLAV and how many times, as some will get to today, we have been right to an incredible degree about something well before we knew for sure. And that's just educated out, taking the data we have, outlining how we think it'll come together based on what we've seen in the past. How many times can we be correct on these things until that becomes something that's worthy of note? I think in this day and age, it won't ever happen. Independent media is suppressed. But I think it's important to see that. Now, in the context of the manipulations in general, right? Whether it's the potential false flag aspects all around the world, Betar USA in the United States, or any number of other I mean, there's so many different things we could highlight to where it could be. This is one that I think is very clear that there's something going on. And there's two ways to look at this. Rather, I think what's already clear is that this is not what they framed it as. Now, the way I was going to say two things is, to me, and Robert is doing an investigation of this right now, probably going to have something today or tomorrow. But to me, it looks like something that was either not planned, and that's just, Robert and I were talking about this, the different possibilities, and I'll read you his thoughts about the settlers who have been angry, right? I mean, even Netanyahu, you got the more extremist, which is even crazy to say about all of them being wildly extreme, of the Ben-Gvir Smotrich side of this, even Smotrich in particular, who's the kind of West Bank settler leader in a way. And ultimately, they're unhappy in a lot of different dynamics with what some of the other parts of the government want. For example, bottom line is, you can understand why you might see settlers carrying out extremist action to drive the government where they want them. And that's happened a lot. Haaretz has written about that. Just look it up. Type in that exact dynamic. You'll find Haaretz have written about it over the years many times. Bombings in different dynamics to force the government. And then, of course, what does the government do? Well, they turn around and blame somebody else, because why not? Never let a good crisis go to waste. Right? So that's one way to look at this. My point is, we can already see this developing, as even Israeli media is covering, that it seems to have been potentially Israeli settlers, like has been the past. And my point is that could have been, they just went, well, let's just blame Hamas because it'll work for us, right? Or it was literally carried out in order to do that. That's what I'm considering right now. Also consider what else we might not see, something else that might not be included. But going into this, it's important to note that it seems that Israel covered this dishonestly from the outset, like we're going to talk about with the Bibas conversation. And I think that just whether this was organized or not, they're willing to lie to you about damn near anything. And I think that's important to know, especially if you haven't been following this show up until now. I think it's a pretty common sentiment to people that actually know the Israeli government.
Let me preface these remarks with, I never, ever believe Israeli figures. I've been in the government too long to know that the Israelis are patent liars. In their intelligence community, in their propaganda community, certainly, and in their leadership, they are inveterate liars. Let me say that.
Important, because it's true. And it's not about Jewish people at large. It's not even about Israelis at large. It's about the Israeli government and the ongoing psychological manipulations throughout that, just like the U.S. government for that matter. But it does bleed into the society, right? Just like in our country it does, like we're talking about with the partisan dynamic. That's how this works. It's important not to broad stroke in just about any concept, but consider all the different angles of it. I think right now what we can see is historically speaking, it's on the record. The Israeli government has been caught lying just since October 7th, even an endless amount of times. So is Elon Musk, for that matter. And we'll get to that in a minute. But so here's Robert pointing this out. Now, see, really quickly, by the way, just jumped into my head. I always battle with this, because I personally find this to be far more important in a world human sense than Elon lying about things in DOGE, right? But I was talking about this earlier with somebody, how it's hard to think, because I think I even have it in here to talk about in a second or later in the show, but the idea about whether or not, calling this stuff low-hanging fruit. I was surprised that I would talk about it. And I said, it's a good point. And I thought about it myself, wondering whether things that I would have previously called, not important, or more and more, as you might have seen over the last probably year or 6 months, there's some of these things I am talking about more that are more like the social dynamics and Elon but that I've started to see, I think, are important in the way that they're manipulating people away from seeing the bigger story. But tell me what you think about that, because it's important to me. I'm still ultimately going to do what I think is important, which is why you guys come here, but I care about what you think. And so you tell me. I could have started today with the bird flu dynamic and DOGE spending and all this, but this would have caught the end of the show and probably got less attention. So I think it's important to mix it around. But so this is a big deal, and we're not even into the ceasefire dynamic yet. But so Khaleesi reports this on the 20th. 3 empty buses exploded at Bat Yam, south of Tel Aviv, within a short time frame. But it's important to note they weren't simultaneous, despite what they claimed at first. She writes, this is a false flag to divert attention away from Israel killing the Bibas family. Because this is what's actually happening right now, and we'll get to that next, is that people like us have been covering the truth about that story, at the evidence that we've had. And all I've ever said about this, and I'll show you the whole time, is that it was reported by the father while he was in custody that the Bibas family had been killed by IDF bombs. Hostages that came out continued to verify that they've seen hostages killed by IDF bombs, some of which were right there with him at the time. Now, he said that at the time, of course, it could have been forced, but every other video that's come out, or after they came out, they've maintained those videos. So you can't just keep pretending that just because he was there makes it false. The rest have maintained it, right? And now he's gotten out, and twice he was quoted as saying either that he still believes that, or that he knows they're dead, or he still believes what Hamas said. That was the latest information, and I've shown you both of those. So it's important to think about is how clearly. I just lost. Anyway, I was going to make a point there. I just lost. We'll come back to it. The overlapping idea of this. Oh, I mean, that's what it was. That people see it. They can see that we have been covering it from the very beginning, that the kids were killed by the IDF bombs, that he claimed that, and now he's back, and the same has been reported. That we can show that they've been hiding from the fact that it was there. The Israeli conversation has been with the Western dynamic that there was nothing. Like that they're alive and we know they should be returned. At the very least, the conversation should be, well, they're reported to be dead, but we don't know that yet. But they didn't want that in the story because this is my opinion, but you can see the way they're responding that they wanted this. They've been using these kids, and I've been covering this. They've been using them as a propaganda tool. The Hamas tried to return their bodies in December 2023. We covered it then, and we'll show you in a minute. And we said at the time, if you remember this, you've been here with us the whole time. I told you in 2023, they tried to return the Bibas family, and Hamas and Israel did not want that. And so they blew up the deal. They blamed something on Hamas. They claimed they lied, and they spun out the deal. The very first pause. Remember that? The pause, they called it. And ever since then, that's been the reporting. And now people are seeing it because they're citing back to people like me and plenty of others that have been showing that information, right down to the fact that he still says that. And so this is a thorough distraction, if you want to look at it that way. Now, before we get back to the Bibas family, Suppressed News highlights that this was on the 21st of today, and it was at 5 this morning. The Israeli Shin Bet arrested an Israeli Jew who transported the perpetrator of yesterday's Bat Yam bus bombing in Tel Aviv. So the first was somebody who was investigated for transporting the person they claimed did this. Later, 2 more Israeli Jews were also arrested. The false flag is becoming more evident. That's his opinion here, it seems. This was a pretext to escalate attacks on the West Bank, which is already happening. Like, my point is, he's right. That has happened since this point. But also don't forget that it was already happening. And that was part of the agreement with Adelson at first, but also with Trump and the fake ceasefire, which we'll get to in a minute. Meaning that they had planned to blow it up right now, or technically right after this would be the beginning of the second phase. But that's right now. Like, so if they blow up this part of it, then that's the agreement they already made. And right after that agreement is when they started going after the West Bank in earnest, or at least more so than they ever had. So I agree. And I think this is all part of an obvious deal. Whether you agree with that or not, realize that's what they've been saying openly in the Knesset. And Israel's government openly telling us. And I've shown you the tweets from people directly involved. So you can't just pretend like we're making things up. This is what they're saying out loud. And I think that's what's obvious. Now, PVT reports directly from Israeli media. So just in case you didn't see these, 2 Israelis were arrested on suspicion of driving the cargo holder. The translation, it's about the exploded buses, saying that they transported these people, right? So very clearly, they're already arresting Israeli Jews for being responsible for this. Now, even if it turns out to be a Palestinian, clearly they're being facilitated by Israeli Jews on the ground, so that has to be seen as a potential false flag, which, again, if you haven't already followed this on our show, it's constant. Israel does this all the time. So does the U.S. government. There's entire resource breakdowns. I was just actually looking at one about how this history of U.S. and Israeli false flags. It seems to be sort of the impetus in a large way, not like in history forever, but like in this era we live in right now where it's become like this constant one after another. But it says 2 Jewish Israeli settlers have been arrested for the recent bus explosions. A total censorship ban has also been issued, which tells you something. Here's the actual, actually, I'll jump to this right ahead. It was right here. Where is it? Right there. So this is, and now this is a report coming from, I remember this person before. I forget, 74,000 followers. But again, it's just it's a screenshot, right? So you don't know for sure, but it has been backed up by Israeli reporting that this is happening, which is that they have put down a censor ban where you're not allowed to report on this. Now that tells you something. It says this was on the 21st early this morning. It says the bus bombings in Israel appear to be a false flag. It's their opinion, but it says the Shin Bet arrested those 3 and then ordered the publication ban. And there's the actual state document. Interesting. So you don't put a ban on the reporting unless you're trying to control the conversation. Now here is Mensch Osint with a video of the person getting on the bus, and here's an actual still shot of the person. Now it says, now don't forget, by the way, it's funny because you get the comments down here going, that's clearly a Muslim. What's funny, by the way, is he's not. It turns out he's a Jewish Israeli person. But what's also ridiculous is just 2 days ago or 3 days ago, an Israeli Jew shot 2 people believing they were Palestinians, and it turns out they were also Israeli Jews. I mean, it's the broken nature of the people who buy into the Zionist mentality. It's so transparent. But it says, update regarding the bus attack. The Shin Bet this morning arrested 2 Jewish Israeli suspects, residents of Holon and Bet Yam, on suspicion of involvement with the transportation. The 2 were known for attempted murder. Not surprising. The perpetrators of the attack are reportedly still at large. There's more of the video down here. No Palestinian resistance group. Oh, you know what? I wanted to read these first. Let me just get to... Yeah, let me just get through these and I'll read you what Robert was saying. All very preliminary, mind you. But it's saying no Palestinian resistance group has claimed responsibility, which, I mean, they almost always do. Subsequently, the Israeli military, Ministry of Defense, instructed the occupation army to increase the intensity of their aggression in the West Bank, which lines up perfectly with the whole rationale and the plan and what was supposed to happen. Why would you increase intensity in the West Bank if something just happened in Tel Aviv? The assumption being that it's Palestinians, but it clearly does not appear to be. At the very least, they worked with Israelis. So it seems manufactured, but you can decide for yourself. RT reported this as well. Photo of one likely suspect. Now, again, I mean, it's ridiculous to try to make arguments based on the way somebody looks, right? Because they're data points, it matters, right? But there are just as many Israelis you could see that look just like that as you could find Palestinians. So the point is that we know what do we know? So far, we know that Jewish Israelis were involved with facilitating this whole process. I think that matters. Now, just the Haaretz article. Shin Bet arrests 2 Israelis suspected of involvement in the bus bombs. We're going to follow up on this. Robert's going to be covering it as well. Now, in regard to that, so that's all. The moment, unless you have somebody drop in the chat something that's happened since we started, at the moment, it's kind of crazy. So my point on this is how this spins, right? So you have the story that starts where it immediately becomes West Bank, Palestinians. That was kind of the early conversation. That we were bombed, we're under attack, this is what happens, where Jews are not safe. And then it very quickly turns into, at least the evidence points to Israeli Jews. And we have to wait for it to flesh out. But just recognize how dishonestly the story starts. And it feels very similar in the partisan conversation in the U.S. right now, doesn't it? Not to say that they're necessarily the same thing, but it just shows you that we're in a very manipulative state right now where people are jamming forward very obvious lies in hopes that you just, Twitter file right along with it, which means you just blindly take what's presented in front of you with no source material. And that's how Twitter files are supposed to work. You've been primed for it. Now, West Bank, as the Cradle reports, this is today as well, a couple hours later, like right afterward. Now, I mean, I will also point out the timing kind of shows that this was already prepared, which makes sense because they're already doing this in the West Bank. But let's not pretend like this whole thing, this massive thing was marshaled within a couple of hours after what was still being investigated. Now, it says, this is in the West Bank at the Tulkarm camp. Netanyahu says, in the past year, we have greatly increased our activity. We entered the terrorist strongholds. He's talking about the West Bank. A place where there is no Hamas. There is overlapping elements of these groups that Robert's talked about, but there is no presence in any sense like they talk about in Gaza. It is in controlled area with multiple checkpoints in Israel proper. And on a dime, because I mean, you could make all sorts of rational points about why they, I guess irrational on why they moved over to this, or, Syria's going on, Lebanon's happening, but really started focusing on this, tearing up the streets, arresting people, raping, torturing, murdering, guys. All of it's happening. And I'm not making this up. Like in the sense of those terms aren't just rattled off to make the point. And that's what they're doing. Settlers have been caught burning people alive in the West Bank just since October 7th, as well as all the sexual abuse it's overwhelming that we have to keep talking about this. But he says we've increased our activity. He says we entered the terrorist strongholds, so Palestinian homes, leveled entire streets used by terrorists, so Palestinians, destroyed their homes like usual, and we eliminated terrorists and their commanders. So now what he's doing is so you're just conflating all of Gaza with the West Bank now. And it says, we are doing very, very important work against the desire of Hamas and our other terrorist elements. Okay, so of course, it was never just about Hamas. It was about extending the mission creep of whatever you wanted to blame. I told you in the very beginning, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who's also in Gaza, has way more people than Hamas. Why we ever thought they would pretend that even if Hamas got destroyed somehow, that this would be the end of it. It's not the case. And it says, what we saw yesterday, the attempt to carry out mass chain attacks, is extremely serious thing. See, this was the plan. It's already blowing up in their face, no pun intended. The point was to carry this over as West Bank bombing us in order to blame the West Bank or Palestine in general. And it says, that's my opinion. And it says, we have increased the forces in the West Bank and Gaza, according to my instructions and the instructions of the Ministry of Defense, and I have ordered additional occupation. So they're continuing to occupy and destabilize. Now, Robert, giving you his just generalized points. Again, this is just opinion, and some of which is based on his research, basically saying contradictory information on the times of the explosions are important to note. The incident began at 8:30, and the buses exploded separately. Yet Israeli authorities claimed that timers were set to explode at 9 a.m. and that they just mixed up AM and PM. But if that's the case, then why wouldn't it explode 12 hours later? Typical lazy Israeli propaganda. I think it's obvious. You guys decide for yourselves. It says 2 Israelis arrested. No Palestinian suspects yet. Hamas denies claiming responsibility. The Telegram accounts hinting that it have no connection to Hamas leadership. So there's some of these accounts saying what is interesting, what works for Israeli agenda. This enables Netanyahu, of course, to blame his political rival, who's head the Shin Bet. An excuse to expand the attack in the West Bank. We're already seeing 3 new battalions deployed as of today. One of the explosives found is now ruled out as an IED part of the attack. So that's interesting. I'm not sure how that flushes out just yet, but maybe there's multiple dynamics here. Censorship placed on the event enables accusations against Hamas to delay the ceasefire phase 2, which is already happening. Now, at the moment, unless it's happened since I started, it's not necessarily that we're stopping like I expect, but they're calling for an extension of about 40 days or something like that. An extension of phase 1, which I think is designed to ultimately sabotage this and not make it so obvious, which again is what they've said was going to happen. We can't ignore that. Now, this is also, it's important to add that the group in the West Bank, the groups there are simply, in his expert opinion on this, not sophisticated enough to pull something like this off without help. So, I mean, you could argue it's both. Maybe they got played by people in Israel. We have to wait to see more evidence. But at the moment, all I want to highlight is that they got caught lying about this. And it's just a simple, never let a good crisis go to waste or more. Because as you can see, they've already used this to rush into the West Bank even more. I mean, and he's literally on the ground in the West Bank right now. This is going to make you sick, and it should. Francesca Albanese from the UN says Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is currently wanted by the ICC for war crimes and crimes against humanity, persists in unlawful actions and now in full swing in the occupied West Bank. These actions are leading Israel to a troubling point in history. It's crucial for international law to be enforced, holding Israel accountable, starting with its leaders. This, let me just get the image up better, is Netanyahu in some random family's home in the West Bank. Just decided to turn it into their own little center. Literally, IDF members sitting on their couches with they've taped up an a Zionist flag on the wall, and they're literally occupying this person's home. Why? Because they decided to. There's literally no legal dynamic here. Even the game they used to play about how, well, your permit's up. This is just another person's home they've destroyed, or rather using until they decide to destroy it. There is no legal argument here, guys. These are occupiers. These are maniacs who decided to just sit down and take. Do you think they needed to do this there? They could have done this anywhere. They're trying to make a point. They're trying to make these people suffer, and your government in the United States is allowing and facilitating this. It says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu raided a Palestinian house in Tulkarm in the occupied West Bank, which was turned into a military base after the family was forcibly expelled. There's nothing about that in any context that is legal. Every part of that's a crime. There's no legal or even military rationale for why you would take that person's home. Are they arrested right now? No. Are they terrorists? There's not even an allegation. They just took what they wanted because these are bad people. It's just one of the most obvious parts of this story. Now, on top of that, Mel points out, or first, Nancy Mace, I'll read hers first, actually. Nancy just got named, apparently, to the Declassification and Transparency Task Force. Head by a Zionist who's absolutely not going to tell you that Israel killed JFK. It says the committee that's going to get to the bottom of the JFK assassination. It says, so naturally, her first order of business was flying to Israel to receive her instructions for obstruction firsthand. I mean, it's actually incredible to me that Rubio has made multiple trips to Israel after just weeks ago getting elected or appointed, or that Trump or Vance or any of them, they've all immediately made their first calls, the first trip to Israel, to a person who's currently should be arrested for war crimes. Nancy Mace says, I'm in Israel, where last night 3 buses were bombed. Oh, interesting. Interesting timing. Why are you in Israel exactly? America First is rushing to Israel to see what Netanyahu needs. How are more Republicans not calling this out? It says, I'm here to see the evil that invaded Israel and deeply harmed her Jewish people on 10/7. Yeah, it's called Israel's government. And it's obvious, the Hannibal Directive and everything else we've talked about. In fact, whichever angle, Hamas even, is funded by Israel right up until October 7th. There is no way to remove them from this unless you're a blind supporter of Zionism or a paid-off manipulator for Israel. And it says, we gave $9 billion in humanitarian aid to Gaza last year, at least half of which, 4.5, was still... Okay, I'm not even to get into the disagreement between them and what they're saying. The point is, if you believe for 1 second that $9 billion was handed to Gaza or Hamas, then you're blind to the dynamic. Everything has to go through Israel. And I made this point many times. You think Israel just hands over the money? I can prove to you over years they've just taken most of what comes through and facilitated in some other level through the PA, for example, which is not on the Palestinian side, acting like they're helping Palestine, but they're just funneling money into their own agendas and stealing what they want. Or as we can clearly see since October 7th, just deciding to cut it all off anyway, which mostly they were already doing. My point is, this person is supposed to give you the truth about what Israel did. I mean, or any number of these things. As you could prove, Israel played a role in a lot of them. Either way, rushing off to Israel does not show you America first. Now, the ceasefire agreement and the Bibas conversation is very important to all this because it is being used like we predicted. Now, I was going to include the title, but didn't have space actually. But also, it shouldn't be about we're right. But I just want you to realize how far back this was pointed out by a lot of us. Muhammad Shihada, for example, saying this is going to be used. And I mean, exactly like we predicted, it's playing out. Now, first, I want you to recognize that we called this on the 15th, not because we guessed, but because the evidence was already there. On the January 15th, before the new alleged ceasefire agreement, Israel, as I wrote, the new ceasefire agreement, Israel already plans to break because they were telling you they had allowances from Trump to do so. Then we went on to monitor and document how they continually broke the ceasefire, how they shot at people they released after releasing them, how they arrested people they released right after they released them, 1,000 different ways. Stopped not allowing in enough of the tents or the houses they said they would allow, not allowing food to go in like they said, not every moment, but continually violating the ceasefire over and over and over. So, and yet in almost every case except 1 or 2, Hamas didn't even say anything. DD Geopolitics writes there, this is on the 20th, okay, so this is yesterday. Quote, it says, there will be no second phase. Gaza will be opened up and liberated with unprecedented fire. U.S. President Donald Trump told his consultants in his reaction to seeing the humiliating return of the bodies of Israeli hostages, I want to see Gaza destroyed, and I do not want to see even one existing building. There will be no second phase of the exchange deal, and we will try to extend the first phase for 2 weeks to recover the largest number of prisoners. That's from Israeli Channel 14. And of course, they could be wrong, or they could be sightings. Or when Lindsey Graham says something really dumb out loud, doesn't always mean everyone in the government thinks that, right? Important to look at it like that. But we're back. This has been backed up long before this. Again, like their arguments already telling you that they knew Trump allowed them to do this. But the interesting overlap, too, is that Trump is continually making the case that, I mean, after everything we've seen, all the atrocities, how many people have been killed, how many women and children, pregnant women, everything, or just the hostages that have been released, the tens of thousands that Israel's holding, and how many of them are emaciated, missing legs, almost, what was it, 333? 333 out of the 367 were not charged with a crime ever, some of which have been in there for years. There's just no misunderstanding that. That's why they just don't talk about it. But Trump is outraged about the people that came out looking a little bit underfed. He's either that stupid or that dishonest. There's only a couple ways you can look at it. Now, Associated Press. This is recent, but I want to highlight a part in this to show you something we've talked about from the past. This is from today, or rather updated today. Well, what I want to show you is it says the Bibas boys became symbols very early in this. I mean, how many times I told you that? The red hair, they thought was unique, and they were making posters and propaganda campaigns. This was already happening. So when they tried to return them in December, they didn't want that because they had plans to use them, even though they were already killed by their own bombs, and I think Israel knows that. So it says, throughout the war, the Bibas family struggle has been a rallying cry for protesters demanding the hostages be freed. There's a reason for that. Kefir was the youngest of about 30 children. Again, taking that child was a crime, and that should be accountable for that. Hamas or whoever else involved should be held to account. There's no way around that. So too should the person who deliberately bombed where they were being held, or indiscriminately bombed that killed their own hostages, even though they tried repeatedly to turn them back before they were killed. Even Times of Israel reported it was the 9th and 10th of October. They tried 2 different times to have a full exchange for the civilians, and they refused. I'll show you again in a second. You can't ignore those things. It says the infant with the red hair and the toothless smile became an icon across Israel, and his ordeal was raised by Israeli leaders on podiums around the world. He says Shiri Bibas' sister, Dana Sitton, has said she did not believe her sister or the children were still alive. She told Israeli news site Ynet that she decided to tell her children in 2023 in December, interesting timing, that Aunt Shiri and their cousins had died. Now, that she just randomly decided that. She did because that's when people got the information came out. So it's even AP. It's like they're trying to avoid highlighting that there was a public statement made by him, and now he still backs that up. But it says, and it's after Hamas claimed they were killed by airstrikes. Now, the point is to highlight the fact that this was something that was a symbol. That's not something organically created. Israel put a lot of money. That's why you saw these things in the New York Times or the Times Square. Massive big symbols or poster board in the United States. How do you don't, there's no logical reason you would do that other than to propagandize a population. Because what is Joe in New York going to do about it, seeing on a billboard, other than be outraged about it? That's what it's about, guys. And so they use them from the very moment this started. And as the Press News writes, and this is on the 21st. Now, and this, so again, quickly overlapping as I already did, the bottom line is they were killed while they were there, according to the father, according to Hamas, and as he now out still maintains that they were killed. Very simple. So we have evidence of the past of other hostages being killed. We have many different examples of hostages who have come home, or rather detainees, telling you that they were protected by Hamas, that they were shielding their bodies, that they were fed, they were treated kindly. Almost every single one of them. Almost all, I mean, all of them actually that have come out have now maintained their videos from when they were there. So you can't keep playing this game where they're all being forced to lie. Then why are they all still maintaining that they said what they said was correct? So now we're at the point where this was beginning to happen. Like well, here's what's interesting too. We mentioned this before. The phase for living captives to be returned was a month ago or weeks ago, right? Israel knows that. We made this point at the time because somebody else did. I can't remember who it was. So when that phase passed, well, they already knew. Were they expecting live hostages today? Well, no, they already knew, or yesterday, they already knew that they were in the phase of dead bodies. So why didn't they start outraging and yelling before this? It's very transparent. So they waited for the process to then go, wait a minute, they're dead, or at least the conversation from when Hamas said that, but they already would have known that logically weeks before this. And also, they already knew, it wasn't a big shocking surprise because it was already public knowledge. It was even covered by The Guardian. That it was stated, right? So this game they play where they're suddenly going, oh, breaking news, this just happened, is part of the game. Every part of that you can see is knowingly dishonest because we know they already at least got word that it might have been the case, right? So now Israel confirms that the Bibas children, along with the wife, was killed in November 2023. Shiri Bibas, along with Ariel and Kefir. Why did they lie to the public? Continuing to act as if they were alive when their deaths were already announced in November. Now, my point is, of course, they could have been lying, right? But you would have been honest about reporting this as they've been reported dead, and more evidence kept happening where you go, well, it seems more likely but we have to find out. So then when it gets reported they're dead, they go, unfortunately, that was the case. It wouldn't be this shocking turnaround, right? That's how they're using it. And most of the liars online, like Elon Levy and the rest of them, are acting like this was just announced. They've never heard it before, even though you can prove they knew, or at least they knew it was possible. And it says it's simple. Israel used the children and their mother to manufacture outrage, which is exactly what we are witnessing now. They exploited their own people for a political agenda, weaponizing the children's death to justify the killing of Palestinian children. Tens of thousands, right? And they are still doing so to manufacture even more consent. And this little graphic breaks down, as you can see, this was November 29th. Hamas says 10-month-old baby was killed, taken hostage and killed. That's France 24. There's The Guardian. Hamas says they offered to hand over the remains. December 2023. I'll show you my post on that. Then, of course, in January is when the father put out the video, and you can see just the text right there. And you can, this has been verified many times over. It is what he said. Netanyahu, you bombed and killed my wife and my 2 children who were in the most important things in my life. Bring them back home so they can be buried in Israel. I beg you to bring me and my wife and my children back home. So here's what I posted recently, just to make sure people saw that this was not a new story. I said, as TLAV and others have been demonstrating since 2023, IDF bombs killed the Bibas family, and that has been publicly available information shared by the father himself, as he still maintains. This is going back to just the 2024 post where I was highlighting this under Elon Levy. Hamas is still holding 2 children. See my point? Elon Levy knew what he was doing right there. He knew that the reports were that they were killed, and it didn't care, because it was about using them as if they were alive. That's the way that the narrative was meant to be built. So I kept going. I kept saying, since you already know that they're killed, as their father publicly stated, and even mainstream media was forced to admit, this only continues to show your depravity. Don't forget, Dan Cohen also covered this, showing CBS was also forced to acknowledge that the airstrikes Israel carried out were the ones that killed them. It's all right in the information. We've been over this many different times. So here is where I post this on the this is underneath Dr. Eli David, who I blocked because he blocked me, which is just, it doesn't get the guy's, I was literally making him look like a fool every single day because he was sharing some of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. But he goes, and this is on 2023, December 22nd. He says, this baby is still held hostage by Hamas and they refused to release him in the hostage deal. See, he was lying right then. They did not refuse to release him. They tried to return the bodies after they were killed by Israel. At least that was what was being presented, right? And I said, and this is what the Washington Post included information around this in regard to the bombing, as well as the fact that we could see that was what was being presented. And now, to this day, he maintains that story. It says, they tried to return the bodies, I posted this, after being killed by Israeli airstrikes. Israel refused. Now, why this was so important is because they were saying that at the time. So if Israel could have said, okay, give them to us then. They could have used that, right? The problem was they already began to build this propaganda campaign, and instead of accepting that or calling their bluff, they turned around, act like they violated the deal. It's all very simple to see, and then just went back to fighting. Remember how it ended, and we told you at the time. They pretended they violated something to basically get away from taking their bodies back, and it went forward. And it says, but keep using them like everybody else. But it's unguided dumb bombs used in almost half of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza at a time when the hostages, as we now know, were all over the place. They weren't even trying to stop. In fact, I think they were trying to kill them. That's the Hannibal Directive. So remembering that, going back to December 22nd, 2023. Now, Mohammed Shihada also pointing this out. He says, as we told you this would happen a month ago, he said, I told you Israeli government and its allies will use the Bibas tragedy to blow up the ceasefire. Now, that's also, I was saying the same thing. Not just the long-term agenda, but the plan I argued made sense in the context of returning their bodies, that they would use this to blow up the deal. Watching the show, you've heard me say that many times already. Israel's government had known for 15 months that they were dead and deliberately chose to pretend otherwise. This is House Foreign Committee. It says Hamas executed a mother and her 2 children in cold blood. That's now the story right now. And I'll show you why they're claiming that, because of another lie by Daniel Hagari with no evidence to back it up. This is a clip that Johnny here shared about the current media just repeating something we've talked about. And I said, some of us have been honestly reporting on this from 2023. And just as we were ahead of on the COVID lie and numerous others, the only reason we were able to report on this that far ahead is because I'm not partisan. I'm objective. And I simply looked.
Said in November, after October the 7th, so quite soon after, that the three, Shiri and her two boys, had been killed in an Israeli airstrike, and they then offered to send the whole family with Yarden too back to Israel, and Israel refused, saying that this was psychological warfare. So,
well, look at that. See, these are provable facts. It's just now squeaking out through the corporate media, probably in the interest of trying to frame a new agenda. The bottom line is he would have already been home if they had accepted it the first time, but they didn't want it like that. They wanted this to be a process they could abuse. That's my opinion, but that's what the facts support. You can see how this went down. They would have accepted it there. They cared to take him back. Instead, they wanted to use the agenda. Now, I said Netanyahu pulls the strings of his U.S. government puppets, right? Now, Nikki Haley jumps up and does the dance. It says, we told you this was the plan. They're using these children, even though they killed them. The father still maintains they were killed by IDF bombs. Are you calling him a liar, Nikki Haley? Here's what she said. Shame on any media outlet that can't call this what it is, murder. Well, I agree. Just different murderer. 2 innocent babies, their mother, and others did not simply die. I agree. Some of them probably starved to death because you wouldn't allow food in. Others got killed by the bombs you used. They were kidnapped, murdered, and their bodies were being held as bargaining chips. How could she possibly know that? Right? The point is, what we do know is that Israeli bombs have been dropped indiscriminately that have killed hostages. We do know that the father still maintains that he believes that would happen. We do know that he put the video out while he was in custody saying that. Those are things we know, okay? The fact that she tries to pretend that we know is just a narrative they're trying to support. There's not a backed up video that makes that case. There's not a signed affidavit. They're just trying to yell the narrative they like. This is a disgusting, lying person using these children, even though she doesn't know the reality. This is anyone who doubts the brutality of Hamas, anyone who thinks these people can be negotiated with. You mean the ones you're currently negotiating with and that haven't entered into a deal that Israel breaks? I mean, think about the stupidity of these people. They're so desperate and so bought off, their narrative has to be just this. I mean, the opposite of what you watch happen in front of you. Hamas supporting these people, keeping them fed, blocking with their own bodies. But let's pretend like, as Israel starves and rapes and tortures on record and then defends it in public TV. I mean, that means Nikki Haley is okay with all of that from Israel's side. Because look at what they did to Ariel and Kafir. Hamas needs to be finished once and for all. That's where we are. Misfit Patriot. This person has 45,000 followers. Says, and of course, what they're highlighting here is the same old Disregard 24 account that lies about literally everything I can see. And it says, it's now confirmed by Israel that this baby was killed, in fact, by these sick, twisted terrorists. Okay, so Israel said something out loud, and this guy goes, confirmed! Typical partisan Twitter-filed nonsense. Right? What we're pointing to are things we can prove. And then we're discussing what we think those things add up to. For anybody to go, they said it, so that's the case, is stupid. I'm embarrassed for you. And it says, before any of you come up with your BS conspiracy theories, oh, isn't that funny? You're the left now. You're the Republicans now pushing back on conspiracy theory. It's embarrassing. You guys have completely turned into everything you made fun of like 20 seconds ago. But the point is, Hamas killed them because Hamas didn't kidnap this baby. They would still be alive. Okay, that's not an unfair point. I made the same point. Hamas should be accountable for it. Hamas, whoever took this child, should be held accountable for it. Period. You know who else should be accountable? The person who bombed an area indiscriminately where they knew their people would be. The fact that you can't say both of those things shows something. But see, that's the problem, is they pretend like you're over here going, only Hamas or only the children. No. An honest person's going to say that's a crime, but that's also a crime. Pretty simple, isn't it? But don't come in here with your BS theories about how this happened. Full stop. End of story. I don't give an S what you spin. You're going to put in the story. Okay, so shutting down and not listening to information is not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of propaganda. But this guy goes, shut up, they killed them, and post that video. It's just gross. It's gross that you're going to take a story that's advantageous for you about children's deaths. Now, this person responded after I posted this simply saying what I think is the truth. And in fact, the reality is, from the moment this started, people like us were fighting far more for these children than anybody over there screaming about killing Hamas. Everything we were doing was about trying to see an end to this and see those people brought home. From the moment this started, despite being framed otherwise, while they're screaming about killing everybody because that's what, I don't even know what the good people would do. And this person says, life is a boomerang. I hope it reaches you and yours with the same love you gave to the Bibas family. I said, I hope so. Since I fought for them since day 3 when a hostage deal was refused by Israel. 9th and 10th. Actually, that would be 2 anyway. I've been fighting for them since their bodies were refused by the Israeli government. And still now, as Zionists continue to use them to feign integrity and compassion while possessing neither. And this person says, did you fight for them when Gazans kidnap babies, elderly women? And how do you fight for them? Didn't even digest what I said. I simply said I did. Did you? Or did you just repeat the vile atrocity propaganda spread by Israel that effectively got this family killed? Did you call out that Israel funded Hamas or starvation tactics by Israel or how Israel refused a full exchange early? Unlikely. But that's how, see, that is how you shut down ignorant people. There's just no air in that conversation. The point is, it's obvious. Yes. Now, even if we might have gone the wrong direction, the point is what we were doing was in the interest of stopping all the things that you've been cheerleading the entire time under the guise that bombing the entire area would somehow get your people back, even though I don't think any of you actually thought that. And then the point is, another story they keep pointing out is the process. Now, look, I'm not going to defend either side of this, the way that they're here, you're wearing this T-shirt, and here he's got this necklace. It's very childish from both sides. The bottom line, though, is that you can see how vicious what Israel has been doing. I mean, it's just over and over, whether they're bombing food trucks, the flower massacre, I mean, just deliberately vicious. Now, but they shouldn't be justifying any side of this. The point is clearly, as well as the fact that we know Israel funds the side, so let's be clear about the bigger picture. My point is that they came out with the coffins. There was music playing that didn't seem appropriate, and then, there are all these breaking down points. Frankly, I care a lot more about genocide than I do about these nuanced points about whether they should have had a different song on or whether they should have done it privately. I agree with all of that. I think both sides keep playing this game, and it should be equally called out, but it seems quite minor in the larger sense of the conversation. Right? But Asaf MD simply highlights that it's not unique to this one side. And if you're going to be critical of something like this, simply because they just played a wrong song or did it publicly or didn't show the right kind of gravitas or whatever you want to talk about, and that's not the right word, but the decorum, then you should care about this, which if you have not seen is when Israeli IDF came out and beat the legs of people carrying the coffin of Shireen Abu Akleh, a U.S. citizen who was murdered by Israel. It's not hard to recognize, guys. They run out and they start beating the people carrying the coffin. There's no guns here. There's no protest. They're just trying to make them drop the coffin. That's what Israel does. I'm not hearing the outrage from the Zionists because they don't care. It's sickening. That's sickening. Now, compared to this, which they're also up. And it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be some kind of comparative point. Both can be disgusting and frustrating, but just recognize the kind of outrage that's applied to something that I argue is in some way inappropriate to this, look at this, guys. It makes me sick that they almost dropped the entire coffin, and that's a U.S. citizen. Ask yourself where the American government is in any of this. They denied it the entire time, despite the fact that you can literally prove Robert did a great job on this. Israel covered up the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh with U.S. help. Hypocrisy everywhere you look. Now, drop site news reports, the Israeli military has announced, this is where it gets more interesting in a disgusting, dark way, that one of the bodies received is not that of the captive, not of Shiri Bibas. Now, this is important because, at least unless it's happened since I've been live, nobody has really sussed out what the truth is just yet. Now, here's what's interesting on top of all of it. So apparently I haven't seen forensics been shown around whether we know this is her body or not, right? But somehow they're able to claim a forensic study to already break down, what was it? I just lost the train of thought. Shoot. We'll come back to it. Well, I think it's the same story. For some reason, I just lost that thought. Anyway, there's a point we're going to get to where they're claiming, God, that's crazy. Anyway, so you'll see as we get to it. I just don't want to try to patch it together without having it in my head. But it says the Israeli military has announced that one of the bodies is not Shiri Bibas. So we don't know that for sure yet. right? It says that they also claim, without providing evidence, as usual, that that according to the assessment of professional officials, based on the intelligence available to us in forensic findings, the two children. Oh, that's what. See, that's so funny. I can't believe I couldn't connect that right there. Is that they're claiming the forensics show that the children were killed by their bare hands or whatever. Seems a little bit grandiose and bombastic to me. Certainly possible, obviously, but we'll get into why that seems to be a blatant lie. Not least of which is the fact that the father still claims they were killed by IDF bombs, but without evidence. So they're able to dump out this evidence they claim shows that these children were killed in 30 seconds, but they haven't got, none of it feels right. And Israel's been caught lying about damn near every part of this story. So let me read this and I'll tell you my thoughts on the body dynamic. They claim without proving evidence that she was killed, without evidence based on the intelligence available, that the two children were brutally murdered by terrorists in captivity. That was the same point right there. And so they claim they returned the two children, but the body turned out to be a Palestinian woman's body. And I'll show you why that's important if it is the case in a second. Forensic examinations focus on the cause of death and the specifics of how the person died, such as blunt force trauma, shrapnel wounds, gunshot wounds, or stabbing. Injuries are described objectively with terms like severe trauma, multiple stab wounds. We've talked about this stuff many times over the years. However, terms like brutally murdered are not typically found in official forensic reports unless there's a propagandized political agenda to it. So just think about that. Because brutally murdered is not something you get from a forensic report, not typically. But how about we just want to see the evidence? Because right now, the only people that have, quote, seen the evidence are their allies that they claim they gave to make sure they can confirm. If they cared about proving this would be publicly released. But this is what Israel puts out. Text on Twitter. Well, they know how to play the game, apparently. That's just Twitter files for you. 9-month-old, same point. They just repeat the lie that I think is an absolute lie. Propaganda & Co. says, what if that body isn't Shiri Bibas? The Israelis, serial liars or just incompetent, can't even be trusted. And the Palestinians, they can't ID their own dead, shredded by 2,000-pound bombs and flattened into flesh pancakes by bulldozers. Terrible point, but it's the truth. It says, even if it was deliberate, doubtful that they handed over the kids without the hitch, right? How does that justify ethnically cleansing an entire people? Zionist monsters swarm Twitter, howling for extermination like it's a sport. Here's the sick twist. This insanity is retaliation against an indigenous population seeking basic human rights, equality, and self-determination. It's 2025. Genocidal freaks still demand subservience or slaughter. Humanity, please, we're stuck in the dark ages. Wake up. Now, the families, the bodies. I mean, look, not only have people been starved, emaciated, and truly it seems that all the hostages or detainees have been kept better than literally anybody, including themselves and other people there, children and women. So, but anyway, the point is, with that holding back food, that could add to this, but the main point is that they've been bombing all over the place. And if she was killed by the bombs, like everybody that seems to have any knowledge of the event claims, that means that they were in a bombing. That means that they would be burnt and maybe smashed or shredded like the doctor was telling you about. So the point being, it's certainly a logical point that maybe they just weren't able to tell. Ooh. Excuse me. They caught me off guard. The point is clearly Palestinians, as they're pointing out, don't have forensic abilities. They can barely even they don't have access to concrete for crying out loud. They've been destroying everything they have medically, technologically. So it's more likely than anything else that they actually just put the wrong body in there. But it's also possible they lied about it because they're going back and forth with this game they're playing. All is possible. But Israel is screaming what they want to be the case, like we talked about the false flag, whether or not the evidence comes out. Important to think about. Now, here's BBC News saying, shock over Bibas body mix-up, latest hurdle in the fragile ceasefire. Again, let's not forget that Israel's broken the ceasefire on record more times than I can count. That's been even reported by corporate media. It's been reported by human rights groups. Same in Lebanon, by the way. You realize they have not even pulled back from the place they were claiming to? No one's even talked about that. Craig Murray's been waving his hands going, they're not caring about the ceasefire. It doesn't even matter. It's such a weirdly and obviously controlled dynamic right now that everyone just focuses in where the structure points, like we're a bunch of trained SEALs. This person says the children were murdered about a month in with bare hands. Their bodies were maimed to match the story of a bombing. The forensics are out. Netanyahu went public. Oh, did he? Or didn't Hagari say that out loud? know the forensics. I mean, and nobody, as far as I could tell, who has any ability to confirm this has actually seen any forensics. These people just blurt out what the narrative is because they've chosen a side. They're infants in the conversation, guys. And this person just says, nope, you're lying because we know that they were killed. The father still maintained. That matters to me. Now here it says Hamas says it's investigating the possible error over the body dynamic. It says Hamas said, now it's so interesting to me. Of course, a monster, a terrorist, whatever you want to say, they could, of course, lie. They could pretend to be good. I mean, that's what Israel's doing right now. Well, not really. In fact, they just say certain things and just do whatever they want. My point is, though, since this October 7th forward, Hamas has continually, consistently shown in their dynamics to be the one that cares more about the way these people presented. And that's not even to say good or bad. I will never get past the part that Israel funded them right up until the 7th. I can't look at this as something that's not potentially compromised. But it doesn't change the fact that you can look and see that they've been legitimately acting within international law far more than Israel in every part of this dynamic. And things like this. Hamas said on Friday it was investigating a possible error in identifying human remains handed to Israel under a ceasefire deal as Netanyahu threatened retaliation for failing to release the body. Like, if you cared about the ceasefire and they simply said, we made a mistake, let us go back and forth, get back to you tomorrow, then you would give it, the benefit of the doubt would exist if you truly wanted this. You know that. Aside from the fact that they just clearly do not, as they've admitted themselves. I mean, it's almost like a waste of time half the time. How many times we've heard from every one of their mouths that they're never going to allow this, and then we debate whether they're really going to allow it. It's just so stupid. But let's play the game anyway. 4 bodies were delivered, and the identities of the Bibas boys and the 4 hostages, one of which was Oded Lifshitz. Remember, the very first woman that was released, who came back later and admitted that they tried to return the Bibas bodies at that time. So another data point, another hostage that was there with them. She came out, I think it was a month ago, and admitted publicly that they tried to return the Bibas families, and they said no. So there's so many data points to prove that they knew they were dead back then. So even right now, the game is disgusting how they're using this. Or the guy saying, don't get your conspiracy theories. Well, is she lying? Right? Are you anti-Semitic? This Jewish person is telling you must be anti-Semitic. It's just, obviously I'm playing the game. It's disgusting what they do. It says, but Israeli specialists said the 4th body was that of an unidentified woman who was kidnapped alongside her sons and her husband during the Hamas attack. It says Basim Naim, a member of the Hamas political bureau, said unfortunate mistakes could occur, especially as Israel's bombings had mingled the bodies of Israeli hostages and Palestinians, thousands of whom are still buried in the rubble. I mean, how is that not like the most logical answer you've ever heard? It says, quote, and they could be lying still, but that makes sense. We misidentified them because they're all burned and broken. Quote, we confirm that it is not in our values or our interest to keep any bodies or not to abide by the covenants and agreement that we sign. Now, of course, they could just be saying that. My point is, consistently, they've shown, acted, and said that the reality that makes it seem that they're far more in line with what people, the rules-based order pretends these two entities, the West and Israel, are, and they're not. It says Hamas said separately that it would investigate the Israeli assertions and announce the results. So what happens if they announce that they can prove that it was her somehow? They'll just ignore it. That sure seems like a legitimate process, doesn't it? The failure to hand over the body and the staged public handover of the 4 coffins on Thursday caused outrage in Israel and drew a threat of retaliation. So they got the families back, but they did it in a way they didn't like, the children. And so that threats of retaliation, it's clear that they're building this into a point where they're going to claim that it's why they are going to stop and it's Hamas's fault, just like we told you. Quote, we will act with determination to bring Shiri home along with all the hostages, both living and dead, and ensure Hamas pays the full price for this cruel and evil violation of the agreement. Oh, really? As you've been violating it, even shooting at the people you released, rearresting them, starving them, but they're going to pay. It's just insufferable. Over and over, when the world clearly sees it, we just have to pretend because of a bunch of disgusting, racist, bigoted liars in powerful positions keep pretending like this all makes sense. Accusing Hamas of acting in an unspeakably cynical manner. Wow. By placing the body of a woman in the coffin instead of her. Like again, it's not possible that it was a mistake. It doesn't matter if it was a mistake. They're using it anyway. That's what the U.S. and Israel always do. Frankly, that's what our governments of any kind always do. It says Hamas said in November 2023 the children and their mother had been killed in an airstrike. And it is Netanyahu, the father said, bears full responsibility. But the Israeli military said intelligence assessments and forensic analysis of the bodies that we don't get to see indicate that they were deliberately killed by their captors. Now, how exactly would you possibly be able to indicate that from a forensic? I mean, of course, it's possible that if they were just completely untouched and they were strangled or something, right? But the forensic discussion, how many times has Israel lied about beheaded babies? How many times has Israel, Netanyahu, Biden, Trump, all of them lied about atrocity propaganda this very moment, about fake forensic evidence, about all sorts of things until it turned out they had none of the raping conversation. And we're just going to pretend like we can just take them at face value, or literally anybody with any sense or any integrity is actually going to argue that? At this point, nobody with a brain or integrity is going to say we take that at face value. You're going to say we need to see evidence to back it up. Like we were saying from day one, whether it was a horrible rape conversation or not, we needed to see evidence. Because that's what a journalist, a researcher, an investigator, an aggregator of information who cared about the truth would do. But yet Netanyahu gave no details on a possible Israeli response, but the incident underscored the fragility of the ceasefire agreement. No, it underscored how much they want to violate this. Hamas must return the hostages as agreed in the ceasefire, it says, the living and the deceased. And it says they have to bring Shiri back and they have to release the 6 living hostages expected tomorrow. It says as the tension over the Gaza ceasefire rose, Netanyahu ordered the Israeli military to intensify operations in another Palestinian territory, the West Bank, after buses exploded. See how all that spins together? The false flag they used to rationalize it or to distract everybody when West Bank was already going on. And this is all, if you look at what we said in the 15th, the show we just showed you, we went through this point by point, and it is exactly what is now happening. Exactly. So you can call us psychic if you want, or you can just recognize that we just were honest about the facts in front of us, unlike most, it appears, in the partisan media. APAC Tracker says, fact, Hamas offered to release all civilian hostages before Israel murdered the Bibas family in an airstrike. We know this because Times of Israel reported this, that the 9th and the 10th, there were offers for ceasefire for all civilians. Here is one from October 17th. There was multiple examples that was reported. Hamas says it will release all civilian hostages if IDF stops the strikes. And they said no. In fact, timing is actually spot on. This is the one I'm able to bring up. This is from CBC News. Defeating Hamas is priority. Everything else is secondary. So that's directly from the Israeli government. Now they got real quiet about that because they realized how angry that made everybody, because it's disgusting. And it shows you that you don't care about the hostages that you're indiscriminately bombing and ended up killing, but recognize that. So if it was secondary, that's why they refused the deal that we now know as a fact was offered. You can't make sense of this without realizing they did not put their people first. Here's Dan Cohen showing you that they tried to push back against their own people who were calling for that agreement to be taken. And what this says, this is a week after October 7th. Netanyahu agreed to meet the families of the captives who demanded a ceasefire and a deal to save their loved ones. And it says, but he brought in a group of fanatical settlers to sabotage the meeting and call for the captives, including children, to be sacrificed. Listen to the excerpt of the secret recording that Dan published, and you'll understand why Ariel and Kafir Bibas came home in coffins. It says we're in a historic moment. And at this historic moment, personal pain can't drive you. This is Ohid Ziv Labadat. I don't know how to say his name. It says, it can drive me. I can lose sleep at night. I'm asking you to show determination and cool-headedness. Do not take our pain into account. We disagree with what you're saying, she says. This is one of the family. There's a whole history resting on our shoulders, the settler says. A whole history. And what needs to be done needs to be done. He says, the family says, first, they need to be freed. That's what needs to be done, nothing else. And the people, the settler continues, that were released in the first round came back to attack us in the second round. Right. So the point being that both, and here's interesting. I think he means it both ways, actually. The hostages that got released were coming out and saying they were treated kindly. Lipschitz was the first woman, and she got attacked by these people. They called her, they see, you aren't Jewish, you're hating Israel. She was just telling the truth, as well as the fact that they're claiming people that were released ended up being ones that, there's no evidence of that. That we can't let them go because they're going to attack us later. The reality is quite clear that we can see, I mean, all we've already covered about the allowance of this, the Hannibal Directive, a lot of different points. But the point now we're getting at is that they are using this to shout back the families who are simply asking for their family members to be returned from a government who claims that was their priority. It says, and the people that were released fought back. It says, and you will have a third round if you release them. It says, do what needs to be done with determination and cool-headedness. And this historic moment, Mr. Prime Minister, you're a historian. She says, really? Do you have children? Are you willing to sacrifice our children? Sacrifice our children? And he cuts her off, and it says, there is a prime minister whose job is to see the whole of Israel and the general rule. There's a chess game. There are pawns. That is disgusting. He just literally called their children pawns, and we can't think about how obvious it is that they're using these people. She says, but it's not pawns. It's not pawns. It's children. It's old people. It's babies. Civilian population. Yeah, you could make the same point about just all Palestinians, but also their family members. The point is, they're on the same side in this. The Israeli government doesn't care about any of them. Says, sorry, Mr. Prime Minister, we are not here for a political discussion. I didn't interrupt you. My daughter is there, said the settler, but he did very clearly interrupt her. And you will hear me out as well, whether you like it or not, says the guy that just called their children pawns in a political game. In the end, Israel has to win, they say. That is the goal. No, see, that's the thing. They're being told in every other context, the West is being told in every context that the hostages are what matters. We have to kill Hamas because then they'll get taken again, or but it's not. It's very clearly that the hostages, as they said in the beginning, were, if not further, were secondary. It says there's the whole of Israel here. There's a whole people here at stake. And with all the pain here, there is a whole people here. The people of Israel, it says, if the prime minister won't return our children home, there won't be a people of Israel. It won't have a right. See, you don't hear this in the West. We've been talking about it. Dan's been talking about it, but you get drowned out by Zionist propaganda because your government is part of that. It says they, the hostages, are individuals. There is a collective. Yeah, interesting how we're being driven to that mindset. Isn't that supposed to be like the left woke collectivism, even though that's currently what the technocratic globalist mindset through Trump's administration is also rolling out, with the different flavor and different words as they work alongside this very entity to do the same thing? Full investigation down here. Now, Daniel Hagari, right, the guy who famously came out and called a Arabic calendar some kind of Gaza threat documentation, who, you know, I mean, over and over, this complete clown has continued to get caught lying about beheaded babies. I mean, every single point of the story, he's been the one pushing forward the blatant atrocity propaganda. That's not even up for debate, guys. It's been public. It's been widely covered, and they just contend it's not the case. So he comes out on today and says, Israeli military says Hamas beat baby hostages to death with your bare hands. How exactly could you possibly discern that? This is the kind of propaganda you get from these morons. They push forward something. They couldn't just say our evidence shows that they were killed by Hamas. They have to make it silly. They have to make it. I don't even think it's by design. I think they're just that bad at this. They continue to think they need to make it more grandiose, and all it does is expose their lie. But the point on top of it, this was today, guys. And you're telling me within 45 minutes, these people online somehow already know for a fact that he's telling the truth? No, they don't. They're just repeating what they heard. Here is what Times of Israel wrote. IDF says captors murdered children, Ariel and Kafir, Bibas, with their bare hands. Now, it says, again, that's just in case you jump to the point, IDF says that's the story. It says the Israeli Defense Forces on Friday said, that's the story, that forensic examinations have revealed that they killed him with their bare hands. We can confirm that baby Kafir, Bibas, just 10 months old, and his older brother Ariel, age 4, were both brutally murdered by terrorists while being held hostage in Gaza no later than November 2023. No later than November. You know, how the reason they did that? Now, here's the case. How much you want to bet that you could very clearly discern that their bodies, their time of death, if they really wanted to prove that, that would be something that would be easy to do. But it's a horrible thing. The very fact that we have to have this conversation makes me sick. It's just like the rape conversation. And the only one responsible for forcing this discussion, it's the Israel's government. That's the one making this the case, realizing that we have more evidence from Lipschitz, for example, that claims she saw the bodies. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that they still could have been killed by the Hamas, but how does that line up with anything else we see? With anything? With everything, going out of their way to protect everybody else. Why? It just doesn't make any sense. But I wouldn't assume I know, just like these idiots online are assuming they know because Israel said. The point is we have to stick with the facts. Right now, the facts are all on one side of the conversation. It's pretty simple. So we have to wait for more. But how much you want to bet that there'd be more evidence that we could see if there was an actual forensic investigation? Not like the lies they spun around and the videos they still show that other liars continue to pretend, prove everything, even though then people come back and go, well, but the video didn't even show that. Doesn't matter, though, because they know their marching orders. Daniel Hagari is the one saying this. It says, contrary to Hamas's lies, the children were not killed in an airstrike. They were murdered by in cold blood by terrorists. Even that, you see what I'm saying? In cold blood? That has a meaning, right? It shows intent, right? There's no way you could know that it was in cold blood. That is them flavoring it the way they want it to sound. It just shows you they're just children in this ridiculous propaganda game. How they were ever able to convince people, it's shouting down racism and influence, buying, threatening, whatever else they're doing. This is what they seem to be capable of. Always showing their hand with their lazy propaganda. And it says the terrorists did not shoot the 2 young boys. They killed them with their bare hands. Afterward, they committed horrific acts to cover up these atrocities. Okay, meaning what they're trying to say is they beat them with their bare hands and then did other things to make it look like they were bombed and killed. That'd be a very difficult thing to prove, even with forensics. Their hands, okay, that could be anything else that would be just as blunt. And then that they are burned and bombed and whatever else could be because they were bombed by airstrikes. I mean, the point is, I bet you that is almost a near impossible thing to prove. It says the assessment is based on both forensic findings from the identification process and intelligence that supports these findings, none of which has ever been shared. It says we've shared it with our partners so they can verify it. I haven't even seen anybody comment on that. I'm willing to bet you that that's nothing but them saying these things to their partners. But that's where we are. So everything we now know adds up to they have just made this story up to absolutely lie about this family to justify what they've always planned was going to happen. Now, some of that is my opinion, but realize that what we just laid out for you from Trump and the agreement about the deal, the ceasefire being broken exactly right now, lining up with the West Bank argument of what they were going to be allowed to do, lining up with every other aspect of how the Bibas dynamic went, from the father to what he still says, every part of this. Think about how unlikely it would be that we would predict exactly this happening from both of these stories coming together. I guess it's certainly possible that it's not the case, and it just looks a lot like that, and all the facts point in that direction. I mean, it's a genuine thing to consider. Possibilities matter. But here we are. It just makes me sick that we have to keep doing this. But this is what we're here for, guys. We wade into these disgusting conversations because somebody has to. You can't just let these liars continue to push whatever. And that's any of the governments we're talking about. China, Russia, US, Israel, they're always trying to jam their lies down your throat. The best thing you can do is question all of them. Now, of course, so now the point is, after really what I want you to do is take a beat right there and look at all that we just played for you, all the information we've shown you, going back to December 2023, and just think for yourself. Really stand back and look at how clear this becomes. But then, with where we currently are, but the father's still maintaining they were killed by Hamas and everyone else just lying about it in other directions, that people like Megyn Kelly use things like this. It continues to show you that these people just share what they want to hear. And that's the partisan mainstream alternative media. We are the media now. Many of these people are like literally half a step removed from corporate media. But this is Noah Berg, somebody who's been sharing egregious Zionist propaganda, many, many, many lies we can prove from the beginning of this. But she says, update. Okay, just so it's clear, there's nothing but pictures here. 2 million views. Nothing but text. Yarden Bibas has now asked to let the world know what happened to the boys in detail. They were strangled to death by bare hands. Their body... Not true. Now, Israel's saying that. The argument that he is calling for this is, the best of my research, non-existent. And again, my point is that he has said twice, as quoted it when he came out, that he still feels that Hamas killed his children. So as... Oh, I thought it was right beneath it here. Of course, probably burying it down below. The point is that, I think it's right here. So Megyn Kelly, based on just these statements, no verification. In fact, I argue that's blatantly false. Megyn Kelly goes, this is sickening, but read it all. Read it all? There's 3 sentences. Now, I only bet you she didn't even look. Show more. Oh, read it all. Make sure you read everything because I'm supposed to share this. My opinion, but think about it. She's supposed to be a journalist. You're going to share that without any information? I said, did you really just share this fact-free and also false post about the Bibas father? Pathetic. Typical partisan media. That's insane. And then here's Blakely, for example, saying, hi, fake news, Meggy. This is a literal lie. These kids were killed by the Israeli regime, but I bet you already know that. You're spreading this deranged lie on purpose because you... My point is, overall, this is based on nothing but this, and this was posted today. This is still developing. Why would anybody pretend to be a journalist share that as fact? That's insane. But you know why, guys. I think it's very obvious what's happening. Another example. Same thing as on the 19th. So less information, mind you, on the 19th. And it says Israel is saying they'll receive the bodies of the Bibas family tomorrow. Hamas murdered them. Look at that. These are not journalists. These aren't even researchers, guys. These are propagandists. To say something like that without saying, I believe this, is simply a propaganda tool. Especially since all the evidence continues to direct otherwise. All of it. At that point, everything was, at the moment was, he had said it, he still maintained it. And they still go with Hamas murdered them because these people are propagandizing for what I think is their Republican side, but that's basically Israel at this point. And it says Hamas kidnapped a mother and let her babies from their, and her babies from their home and murdered them to keep their hostages for over a year. Just adding the narrative, right? Good job. Good research, libs. You're doing a great job. You are just as ridiculous as the Democrats you keep calling out. Now, yes, they were taken, and yes, it's a crime, and it should have never happened, and somebody should be held accountable for that. Also, every other crime we've talked about. But I said they were killed by IDF bombs, and same point. I know you already know this because it's been posted beneath your propaganda for Israel on the Bibas family many times. It's just vile what you're all doing. Here is Rami Abdul from the Euromed Human Rights Group. Just to demonstrate a quick overlap here. So we could all agree that a child shouldn't be caught in all this, right? For whatever reason, for whatever side, should not have to endure all of this, right? So yes, the Bibas family in general should have never been there. Nobody should try to rationalize why that made sense in any context, and somebody should be held accountable for it. So too should the responsible party behind every single one of these children. All these kids, where you're seeing here, are children that were killed by Israel. Now, there's always all sorts of narratives and Hamas and human shields and all this, despite him never being proven. And I mean, never. They've argued this forever. And I'm not even saying it's not possible. Of course it is. But you know what we do have? Overwhelming continual evidence just from October 7th of Israel using human shields. Neighbor procedure, mosquito protocol, over and over and over by even the Guardian, the rest of them. But the narrative still drags on in one direction. What does that show you? And now Netanyahu today vows revenge after Israel says Hamas sent the wrong body. Is that what your response would be? This is your response if you are waiting to use what you plan to manipulate. That's my opinion. I argue somebody in this position would not jump to revenge off of what could obviously be a mistake. But you know what Israel is at this point. I don't think you're confused. Now, again, here's what Kash Patel, somebody in the current administration who we would like to believe would care about things like this if we were living in the world of, fighting for the right reasons. But again, here's what he had to say. Or actually, I already played it. I think it's right there, but yeah, why not? I'll play it again.
Trump is elected. Imagine the efforts of the Israeli military and the Mossad combined with the maximum pressure of a new Trump administration against Iran.
Aaron's absolutely right. We should be side by side, and that can't happen unless we have an election that changes the commander-in-chief's seat. And when we are back in power with President Trump, you will see what we did with Israel and the Prime Minister and our special forces and their intel operation. We will be standing side by side with them. We will shut off the machinery that feeds money into Iran.
Is this what you guys voted for? I thought it was the peace candidate, right? I thought it was no wars. I thought it was all about not doing this or getting involved with Israel, funding Ukraine, all of which have happened on overdrive. Oh, just like with Biden. Surprise, surprise. Like those of us nonpartisan objective people were trying to scream, well, you called us black-pilled. And over and over and over, it keeps happening. Make a new excuse. I'm sure you know how to do it.
We'll no longer have 100 hostages still in captivity.
Forget about the 10,000 plus that are held, many children, most without charge. But who cares about that? Right? We only Americans, by the way, more than once. But who cares? It's not hard to see which way they care, guys.
Israeli and American and otherwise by Hamas and Iran's Hezbollah mercenary forces. Donald Trump rescued 50 hostages and detainees. That's more than every president.
Oh, he did he? Donald Trump rescued them now? Or was he just existing while that happened? This is the whole point, guys. This was the win they pretended it was the weird. We caused the ceasefire that Biden couldn't accomplish. No, you didn't. You just caused the extension of the same thing that was already going on. The fake ceasefire, which was meant to be exploded, which caused, this has happened 4 times now. So all you did was continue the same agenda. But people have come home, which is good. Period. I'm glad they're no longer being held. But realize the dynamic has not changed. And all Israel did was get more people removed and continue to take and bomb and kill people in Palestine. Right? So yes, those human beings, I'm glad they're not suffering anymore. But I'm also hoping that we can stop the suffering in general. If all you cared about was one side of that conversation, you're a disgusting person.
Perform combined. And I hope he wins on November 5th. And Aaron's right. We need America to wake up and prioritize Israel. And that is not.
Yeah, is that what you want? Wake up, guys. Prioritize Israel. Hashtag America first, right? Well, don't worry. There's no problem because Israel's not an issue, right? You're just a conspiracy theorist. Oh, meanwhile, Laura Loomer says the CCP has infiltrated GOP. The GOP has a China problem, she says. And this Pat says, China everywhere, and shows like every member of Congress being completely overwhelmed by AIPAC. Don't forget, Thomas Massie himself said everyone has an AIPAC guy. There is no other lobbying group that has something like that. You just don't make this, it's transparent. Now, I'm not going to pretend that China's not doing similar things or trying to. That's what an objective person would argue, that Russia and China, they're all doing this stuff. But to try to deviate your attention from what is slapping you in the face, somebody like Laura, who is wildly Zionist, compromised, lied about all. Don't forget, right before this all kicked off, she was the one that tried to steal research and claim that she had broken some story about the Azov movement. And what did she leave out? Israel. Surprise, surprise, right before that became relevant for where these agendas are going forward. She is a manipulator. But China, guys, the point is we should worry about government, guys, power structures. But here is what they're doing. So this is what they're all supporting, whether it's Kash or Trump or Vance or Loomer. These are the people that are trying to warn you about the reality. So as they're trying to convince you that we should be, that they're going to kill they're trying to manufacture the implosion of the ceasefire, which they've already been promised by Trump. Here are doctors, another Jewish doctor, mind you, who is trying to tell you what's going on there long before October 7th and then being shut down in the land of free speech.
Jewish, and I've been to Gaza as part of the humanitarian medical delegation. That was about 5 years ago. At that time, Israel was doing the same thing it's doing now, but it was a slow genocide. Now it's full out, the gloves are off, and the mask is off.
I've told many people that our doctors have been arrested and put in jail and tortured. Israelis are excellent at torturing people. They do it all the time.
A well-known orthopedic surgeon was taken to their torture prison and was raped to death. Raped to death.
I mean, it's incredible, guys. How in the world are we at this position? How in the world are we in a spot where influential people at the highest positions of power in this government are pretending this is not happening? How transparently obvious this is. The countless reports, the public discussion of why they should be able to rape prisoners, and we still can't see the reality here? Where are all the honest conservatives out there standing up and screaming down at the people who are driving your party into the ground? I know you guys don't believe in this. I know you don't support an ongoing genocide or ethno-nationalism that's destroying a genuine belief you have about a nationalist mindset that does not have to be racism. You're being played. I mean, it's so obvious to me. They are driving you in the wrong direction, even though you do not believe in what they're doing. Stop listening to these mindless Republican screamers who are driving you into the ground like a Laura Loomer.
For just 2 minutes, please.
Israelis are excellent at torturing people. They do it all the time.
A well-known orthopedic surgeon was taken to their torture prison and was raped to death. Raped to death.
Please, for just 2 minutes, please. And that's it. Now, we're done.
Be the Nobel Peace Prize winner.
It doesn't matter. None of that matters.
A Nobel Peace Prize winner trying to speak openly in the public about Israel, and they are shutting it down. This is Trump's America, guys.
Peace Prize winner.
Now, just to be clear, for those new to the show, it's not unique to one side or the other. My point is that both sides of the paradigm are actively creating a world in which they can suppress your speech because Israel said so. It's pretty simple to see.
Doesn't matter. None of that matters.
And we can't even speak up in our own country. Fascism. Say this is unusual. This is targeted, obviously. Bombs are killing hospitals, bombing hospitals, and we can't talk about it. Where the bombs are coming from. It's embarrassing. It is an absolute disgrace.
You cannot do it.
Demonstration.
Even
no signs.
You're bringing attention to your cause. Stop demonstrating. Disperse. It's done. It ends here, or else we start giving warnings, and everyone that's involved here is arrested.
Thank you.
Arrested. How fast this happens. Right? What was all that about? Pink-haired Democrat woke mindset? Yeah, these are doctors out front their hospital trying to inform you about what they've seen. And they're going, you can't say these things. You shut you down. Yeah, this isn't the UK, guys. This is the United States.
Forgetting the children.
We are here in Washington, D.C. Thousands of doctors gathered in front of Congress. They are calling for the restoration of funding to UNRWA, and they are demanding...
Did she say Congress? I could have sworn it was in front of the hospital, but she said Congress in case I was wrong there.
the release of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia.
And so I'm...
It is to your cause.
Doctors We are here in Washington, D.C. Thousands of doctors gathered in front of Congress. They are calling for the restoration of funding to UNRWA, and they are demanding the release of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia.
And so I am here with my colleagues, both doctors, both psychologists, veterinarian. Yeah, everyone's just here really making sure that the voices of the Gazans and the Palestinians generally aren't forgotten.
Right? Of course, it's all woke, lefty nonsense, right? Is that how easy it is to dismiss genocide? Well, I've added this to the long thread of doctors speaking out, right? There's 40 plus, I think, of different doctors all around the world telling you is genocide, telling you they watched them snipe children, telling you they watched them execute doctors over and over and over and over. But here we are. Apparently, it's all still fake news because evidence doesn't matter. But this is where I think we are. The Trump administration and the technocratic Zionist coup of the United States. I think it's very obvious. So I'm realizing right now that I might have to cut this short today. Let me look at my time, see where we are. What I'm planning on getting into, I'm planning on doing a show tomorrow, regardless, was the spending dynamic. What did we title this today? Let me play something. I'll be right back.
When were you in Gaza? End of April for the first couple weeks. And then there's sniper bullets. I have children that were shot twice.
Wait, you're saying that children in Gaza are being shot by snipers?
Definitively. I have 2 children that I have photographs of that were shot so perfectly in the chest I couldn't put my stethoscope over their heart more accurately, and directly on the side of the head in the same child. No toddler gets shot twice by mistake by the world's best sniper. And they're dead center shots.
In fact, more than 20 doctors recently in Gaza also told Sunday Morning about gunshot wounds to children.
Yeah, so my plan here, guys, unfortunately, just not worth getting into, but the point, I'm going to have to cut this a little bit short today, but I want to, the plan is to try to get to a show as early tomorrow and get into this, but I'm going to go over some of the things we're going to talk about here that I want you to see. Now, this part of it, we can get into more. This is simply about the overlap of the whole artificial intelligence, kind of Palantir dynamic. Tech giants, Microsoft, OpenAI, accused of enabling Israeli genocide in Gaza. Surprise, surprise. That's from today. Okay, that's OpenAI, that's Sam Altman, the overlap of X and Twitter, and it's all very clear. I think it's all similar in the same dynamic, showing you that they're all working together with this Israel genocide, highlighting some great articles from Derek around the different acolytes, different, supporters of Teal that populate Trump's administration, and then overlapping, as he promised, the discussion of Curtis Yarvin and the philosophy driving a lot of what they're talking about. We're going to get into an interesting point about the data, which I'm very concerned about, the reality of how clearly it shows you that they have now access to cybersecurity data and just about everything else with no oversight, and why that should be concerning with we'll get into this more tomorrow as well. That guy we talked about having a history that seems suspicious, but also the idea that DOGE has access to top cybersecurity agencies while Israel's building their global cybersecurity network. It's not always about Israel, guys, but I think that's what I'm seeing. But either way, it's concerning with what's happening. Solar Report simply asks, unanswered question. If significant amounts of U.S. government data, which is also what I think is happening, have been illegally transferred to Palantir and Grok 3 AI programs, how will privacy be enforced? We already showed you them saying, well, we'll do our best to enforce that, but we'll go forward anyway. That was Trump's administration. Are we not worried about them using the largest data source in America for training AI programs like they're telling you they're trying to accomplish? With no oversight, with access to this team that are currently being shown to have, it's insane. Even if you're right about this guy, the fact that we're not expressing concern about the incredible consolidation of power here shows you that you've either never cared about what you claim we're fighting, or you don't see that this is happening, because the consolidation of power is terrifying. But the amount of data they're taking, I think we need to be worried about that. We'll talk about this more. But what I do want to show you before I go is this clip that I thought was kind of interesting. And then we'll dive into this in depth tomorrow about the spending, but I'm going to give you some of them on the way out here. But in case you didn't see this, the shout out goes to Imran. I'm not familiar, but I just saw this today. Sakidi, or how do you say that? Siddiqui. He says, bro's own AI thinks he's a disinformation agent. I figured, okay, let's try it, because, sometimes these things can be finicky, but let me just play the video and then I'll do it publicly for you. I tried it for myself. And if you right now, at least unless it's changed since I went live, if you ask Twitter, if the AI, Grok 3, who is the largest spreader of misinformation, it will straight up tell you Elon Musk. Here's the video. I'm reading it off something while I'm typing it, so give it a second. I wanted to make sure it was, in fact, I think I switched the two words around, disinformation, misinformation, but the point is I wanted it to be just like his query. And then he says, answer with one word. And sure enough, Elon Musk. That's just kind of funny, isn't it? But so let's get into this a bit, because there's points to be made here, right? So I said, how embarrassing, mostly for those blindly trusting this blatant deceiver. And that's not my opinion. He's been caught, I think, provably lying to you, not just being wrong many times already. But this person makes a good point and says, if you ask who's the biggest information truth spreader, it'll answer with Elon Musk. And I did a similar version of that and got a one-word answer of Elon Musk. And so I was, okay, that's interesting. But what's funny, as I said, well, they were like saying I misunderstood it. And I was like, well, you assume that I misunderstand this. I don't. Like, this is exactly what I was actually saying, is that what they just demonstrated actually makes the point that what they're trying to say is basically impressions are king, right? So if you are Elon Musk or somebody with that much reach and you're just dumping everything you find online, then in an equal sense that well, see, the best way to look at it is like this. If you're not checking information and you're just sharing whatever you think you're seeing, it's going to be a pretty good guess if you're getting that much information impressions that you're going to be seen as a lot of the claims are going to be wrong. A lot of claims are going to be right. So all I'm trying to highlight for you is that the reality is that its own AI sees that he is the largest spreader of dis, and just wrong information. But at the same time, it's saying that he's also spreading the most information, or even truth if you ask it in a certain context. The point is that I'll just read it directly from Grok itself. And I mean, you can just see it. We type it in. So you can just see it live. Let's see if it's changed, actually. Elon Musk. Okay. So the point, though, is if you ask it right here, give me the percentage breakdown of how often Elon Musk posts turn out to be factually incorrect. Here's what it says. One notable analysis comes from a widely discussed evaluation attributed to Grok, cited in posts and articles found on February 20th. So someone just did this recently. This analysis reportedly examined Musk's last 1,000 posts on Twitter and concluded approximately 48% were factually accurate, about 22% were deemed outright false, while 30% were classified as misleading or ill-informed, often oversimplifying complex issues or amplifying unverified narratives. Okay? So that's 52% incorrect, false. So my point is this. If you had an intention of being accurate, a flip of the coin is not accuracy. That means you're not even caring. But what I'm arguing is that so you have to understand, if you're asking Grok truth. So if you come on and say today's Sunday, that would be an example of you being truthful on the platform, right? It doesn't always have to be about you breaking news. So him just stating fat things on Twitter and seeing how he's get the most impressions and says the most things, it's logical that he would be the largest spreader of misinformation and truth. That's information and truth, simply because you're saying, my name is Elon Musk, or I agree with that, or whatever it is. But then at the same time, you're sharing content that 52% of the time is incorrect and inaccurate. To me, that paints one picture. You're dumping things on this platform and you are wrong half the time. How do we not see this is his new AI platform? I think that's insane. It's funny. I think it's funny. My point is, I do appreciate this person's statement because it does add some interesting thought to it, right? It doesn't have to mean that you're just deliberately being wrong or misinforming. But I think based on the statistics alone, you're either not checking your information or you're deliberately deceiving. There's no other way to look at that. If 52% of the time you're wrong, and realize that that also means, like, okay, this is how you have to look at it. Being wrong would be like him misspelling his name or saying that it's the wrong day of the week, something like that. But at the same time, it's also being wrong about information you're spreading. So how often do you think he's going to be saying the wrong day or misspell? That doesn't happen as much as you saying today's Tuesday and being tagged as something right. These are basic examples, but you can broaden it out, right? Talking about something that happened that day, or, you know, if it's seen as accurate, that gets tagged or gets, wrong word for it, tallied, I guess. So I think what this shows you is that this is, like I just said, most of the time being incorrect, which I don't know how that's an accident, unless you're just not checking anything, which I find the point, right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing in all this. But nonetheless, it's his AI. I just find it to be ridiculous. Now, Elon Musk today comes out and says he's going to fix community notes on Twitter after claiming without evidence, as most things he does today, they're being manipulated by governments and legacy media. Okay. So let me get this straight. So first of all, I get the sense this is just about muddying the waters. Nothing means everything. Everything means nothing. Don't listen to it. Just listen to what he tells you the truth is. Don't you get how that's continuing? Undermining everything left and right. The point here is that if community notes is broken, does that mean that everything up until now is not true? How does that make sense? Or you're trying to say that they're gaming the system. Well, guess what? So too have you and Israeli bots and everything else. We've been pointing out the entire time, because the way the system works, you can just overload it. Sort of like you can mass block somebody and get them downgraded and suppressed, like he already showed you, which is being used. I can see it being done to me. Where you look and there's only 2 comments showing and there's 50 comments. Like clearly it's being done in very certain conversations. So you then don't have any influence on the conversation. It's being gamed. And in this case, does that mean that he's now going to change it in a way that stops them from being able to do that, but they're still allowed to, or that he's going to fix it? Who knows? The point is that this is just about them cultivating the direction. Just like with the AI, changing Grok, I think it's all about very clear information control. Now, in general, don't forget that we just talked about this. I just broke this down. One of the major misinformation spreading points was about that whole social engineering manipulation about Reuters. And I proved to you in the conversation that it was mostly during Trump's administration, that it wasn't even the Reuters news agency, that Donald Trump lied about it at the very end point, even though he was the one mostly funding it. He says, give us the money back. And it all spun out. It was very clearly a lie. So was the Gaza condom story. One after another, they're getting caught blatantly lying about this stuff. I was going to include this today from more of the We Are the Media Now, sharing an old video from 2016, claiming it's new reports about Obama's birth certificate. You know why that's happening? They're trying to distract you. That's my opinion. And, Ryan Matta, the rest of them shared the same thing from Jack Straw. Now, this one we'll get to more tomorrow, but it's just embarrassing. It's this placation move where they bring in, by the way, a corporate media person for the head of X News, whatever that even means. Why would there be a head of X News when there's no, is there going to be a news division? Do you not see where this is going? He is a corporate media stooge, and they invite him in, I think from Wall Street Journal, and they sit him down in this weird little chair off to the right. Apparently that's the new chair for the new media spot. I'm just like, hopefully most of you can now see they're simply making fun of you. Here's your special off to the side placation seat, currently filled by the We Are the Media Now news head, who also happens to be Legacy Media. I mean, if this was, why wouldn't they just sit with everybody else? Like, it's just so dumb how obvious we can see this, but we'll come back to this more. I wanted to end with highlighting some points here that I thought were important. Robert just covered this. No, USAID did not give $3 million to a Gaza-based rapper to make anti-Semitic music. We'll go into this more tomorrow. The main point, guys, this was a bipartisan-supported, AIPAC-funded effort. It's embarrassing that they can't do their due diligence or they don't care. So this comes from this guy, Mike Lauer, and Bill Ackman sharing it, or this Insurrection Barbie, complete, just blind sycophant of Elon Musk, saying USA paid this rapper. No. It's very simple. You can see clearly that, one, he's a Christian Palestinian. He's not anti-Semitic. His songs are about Palestinian liberation and not about anything bad to Israel. It's the one thing is about him referencing the Holocaust and saying that Palestinians are going through something similar, because guess what? They are. The point is, the rap songs he made were way before the funding came through, years before. The funding, I still argue, was about a regime change manipulation tactic. That's what the engine is for. And that's why AIPAC supported it, mind you, was after that. How can you talk about an AIPAC-supported, bipartisan-supported funding operation, which was for some woke thing for people there, but it was about the regime change that both sides used, or rather just regime change, but also just intelligence operations. And they try to make this about USAID, Biden's administration funding anti-Semitic rap songs when literally none of the story is correct. Other than the fact that this guy did make rap songs. Look at it for yourself. Robert wrote an excellent article about this. There is another on top of 45 other lies from USAID alone, not even getting into just general spending. We'll get into more tomorrow. It's just sad how many people continue to support these egregious lies, again, or the Gaza condom story that they still try to pretend was the story. Let's realize it didn't even spin out to, it was somewhere else. No. Only $7 million was spent in the entirety of 2023 for condoms and for all of their projects. To pretend that 50 million was one location for one shipment, it's a lie. It was a massive package for some kind of STD, HIV, which probably included some condoms, which I don't agree with any of that. None of that should be happening. But the fact that we don't care about this, or people will shout you down, like I could show you tomorrow, people going, people lie. Who cares? Well, I do. I care. Don't you care about the facts, or do you just like the story that you're winning? Now, this was the actual transaction, or the actual contract for this. And I also want to point out that it has not been terminated. So I think that's stupid, right? So they're screaming about this, but they haven't terminated it. And I'm going to go over that more tomorrow, again, showing you that that's what actually happens. But here's Insurrection Barbie going, oh my God, look at how USAID gave things to linked terrorist organizations. Linked terrorist organizations like the Muslim Aid Organization or Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Now, I'm the first that will tell you these are abused by your government for very clear, surreptitious reasons, but to claim those are all terrorists, it just shows you how stupid this person is, how ill-informed or propagandized they are. But let's look at the total. $164 million over, I guess, the entirety. I guess we'll assume that, seeing as how there's no source material and no information. Fantastic. We are the media now. You know who else got some money, though? Israel. Just since October 7th, got $17.9 billion. And that's in a I don't even think that's including what Trump is already giving them or about to. And you're worried about, just think about that. A smattering of different focus points for different groups, many of which are just helping people. And I will never argue that those things aren't also being used for some kind of intelligence operation. Both things can happen, guys. But no one cares about that. Oh, this is that point right there. So I say, nope, they didn't give it, right? This person goes, yeah, people lie. What's your point? What's my point? How crazy that is. And he says, we shouldn't be sending the money. Well, we both agree on that, bud, but you're probably assuming I don't. I didn't give an F if Congress passed it. Well, you should, though, seeing as how the argument is that it was some secret thing, right? This is, I don't want it. Well, neither do we, man. See, this whole pushback comes from the premise that somehow we're arguing it should keep happening because they can't see beyond a partisan lens. But it goes, until the government can make it where each taxpayer has a say where their money goes. Well, we agree, man. You will just have to deal with it, like I had to. Okay, so you're blindly assuming I'm on the left as if we deal with different governments, and now I just have to wait until I'm in power again. These are the people we deal with. I don't think it's a bot. I think this is part of this country. And I said, then looking forward to you calling out the current administration verifiably doing the same right now. But something tells me that won't happen. And the people that are lying in this case are the ones in power making change. So it obviously matters. Stop being a child. No response. Now, we're going to go into in depth in regard to the argument that Elon Musk is faking DOGE results. I think it's pretty clear. He just reported, which I hope made you guys laugh like it did me, $4.7 trillion in almost impossible to trace, which also means never going to be proven. And if you look through this, it is nothing but him stating this publicly. And guess who blindly reports it like everybody would expect? DOGE discovers 4.7 trillion. No. They've said that, sure. And maybe it's true. I'm not going to say I know it's not because I'm not silly like these people. But think about how lazy and how insane that is, that they are claiming they know this when all you have is Elon Musk saying that. I just don't know why people do not see how weird this is right now. Now, we'll go over all of this like I keep saying. I'm trying to give you some of these on the way out. The point, and then here's one of them saying, this is the only thing I could find. Yeah, and I'll show you the website today and more tomorrow. This is their post from the 17th. The field was optional. This TAS Treasury Access symbol was optional. Now they've made it mandatory. It's like, okay, it's all just statements. Who knows if was it even a thing or if they're even going to do it now going forward? Why we think we can just trust them is beyond me. But they say 4.7 trillion in payments was often left blank. Wait, 4.7 trillion in payments and was often, so it's saying that there was optional for that much and was often left blank, making traceability almost impossible. As of Saturday, this is now required. That's where this statement comes from. That's where the New York Post wrote entire articles about. Oh, here's a link. Source material. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, weird. It's just a random page giving you the definition of TAS. Great. So we have zero information to go on with a $4.7 trillion claim. Doesn't that feel weird? Tomorrow, if it gets proven, we'll talk about it. The thing is that right now, my point is not whether it's true or not. It's how many people are blindly using the story, even when they don't know it's true. That worries me. Like Alex Jones and Owen here, for example. Deep State, here's the story. Extension. Deep State attempts to hide $4.7 trillion of untraceable funds. Oh, I'd love to see your source material, Alex. Or are you, like usual, just blindly citing what was told to you because it works for your narrative? How sad. Or a story we'll talk about later about claiming $20 billion in gold bars was found, even though how embarrassing this is. It's actually the EPA, what's his name? Zeldin, using an analogy. He's talking about gold bars from the Titanic. And then in this very video explicitly says, what I mean by that is your tax dollars being thrown away. But nonetheless, this story got spread by people like this with 3.2 million views that literally took at face value and says, shocking, the Biden administration hid 20 billion in gold bars. This is the We Are the Media now, guys. How silly this is. And you can, I mean, here.
To them and to the American people. Which I reiterated at my confirmation hearing.
Why is that crazy?
I would immediately get a.
What is that about? Are you guys hearing it weird like I am? Let me try it one more time. Let me know in the chat. Was that sounding weird to you?
Following this revelation, during my meetings with members of Congress, I made a very important commitment to them and to the American people, which I reiterated at my confirmation hearing that if confirmed, I would immediately get a full accounting. Fortunately, my awesome team at EPA has found the gold bars. Shockingly, roughly 20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This scheme was the first of its kind.
All right, well, it played the part. It was, that's just interesting to me how these things happen. Why would that be weird in the one thing I download? But let's try something else really quickly. Oh, look at that even. It's unlisted video. Why would that be? That's interesting. Let's see. I gotta see if it pops up. Oh, here it is right here. Oh, wait, is that it? No. That is interesting. It won't even pop up when you search for it. That is very, very odd to me. So now for some reason, I can't get this to download. God, that's so frustrating. What is that about? Does this one sound normal?
You have somebody in our...
Yeah, that sounds normal.
History. And it was purposely
How strange.
zero tolerance of any waste and abuse. An extremely disturbing video circulated 2 months ago featuring a Biden EPA political appointee talking about how they were tossing gold bars off the Titanic, rushing to get billions of your tax dollars out the door before Inauguration Day. The gold bars were tax dollars, and tossing them off the Titanic meant the Biden administration knew they were wasting.
All right, let me try this one. Try this one for you real quick.
Unset the company.
Oops, that's not the one. There it is. That's so crazy. See, that just doesn't make sense to me. I can literally play this on screen in perfect volume. And then all of a sudden it just doesn't download for me twice in a row, the one video. I just think that's strange. Who knows why? I think that's very odd. Try this. Let's see. Ah, damn it. You can at least see the subtitles. Pretty simple. It's incredible, though, that we have to be in a position where we have to engage with this kind of nonsense. But people are reporting this, and it's being shared as if that's the case. Now, here's why I wanted you to hear that. Going forward, all of a sudden, that becomes a conversation, right? So it's I think what I'm seeing in all this is that they're either seeding these false conversations so that we jump at them, or they're taking advantage of morons online like that jump at false stories, and then they stoke the lie to keep you distracted, to keep you spinning out. Now, Fort Knox has been a conversation for a long time, whether the gold's been moved and so on. But funny how that story comes around, and then on its heels, we get this. Looking for the gold at Fort Knox, and it's gone, and the gold and property of the American people, I sure hope it's still there. Like, what's the impetus for this? I think it's all coming from a similar location. Or right after that, you continues, and Mike Lee does the same. As a U.S. Senator, I've tried repeatedly to go to Fort Knox. Like, where'd this all come from? Elon Musk again. Who is confirming that gold wasn't stolen from Fort Knox? Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. They just want you diving down these things to get you distracted, in my opinion. Then Trump on the 20th comes out and brings up gold Fort Knox again. I just think it's interesting. Now, what we're going to go over tomorrow is a lot of spending that I can prove to you is false, right? So what we saw before was this DOGE page where it just said receipts are coming and then extended it out like 3 different times. Now we actually have links, which is nice. What you're going to get, though, is links to things like this. Right, this. Now, instead of having a link to the actual spending page, they recreated their own database. So you have to go through this it's just one more step, which is just infuriating. Instead of just linking to the actual contract, like you easily could have. But the good thing is you do have the number right there for the actual contract, and you can copy that and look. Now, what I've found right away are things like this, right? You can see this Burma diversity 2025. They're claiming that 45, damn it, I just lost that. Yeah, well, now it's too far back, but you saw it. I'll show you the contract. How did that even happen? That is ridiculous. My God, here we go. $45 million. Okay. Sounds nice, right? Okay, let's check a look. And there's the number. Okay, here it is. Burma Diversity Inclusion Program. Oh, looks to be USAID, ending on 2028. Terminated. So that's what it looks like. Terminated for convenience. Okay, so remember from before, when we had these numbers where they were extending out. That's not even the best one. I will show you one more before we go. That is what it looks like for them to end it. Now, 129. We've seen action taken well after that gets maybe Biden. No, that's them, okay? And they did end this, because it was one of the ones that got focused on, that got discussion. $45 million, crazy anyway, that anything we spent for something like that from our tax dollars is just lunacy. So that, just remember, that is what you're going to get when it ends. Here's another one. Where was it? Highlighted? I think I ended the highlighting. Anyway, here's the contract. FDA, bunch of different things. I'll show you in the contract. There's the number. Oh, wait, I got myself mixed up here. I want to show you just one of these really quickly. Hold on, where was it? This one. Is that the one? How did I get these mixed up? Well, anyway, what I want to show you, and we're going to go over this in depth tomorrow, is that there are examples of these things that are in there as removed that have new funding for them. And I think that's very important. And the one I was going to show you on these ones are, for example, the ones that are not ended. So they're continuing. I think that's important as well. But where was the one I wanted to show you? I think it was, let's see. Further down. Got a bunch more in here. Some of these I wanted to show you. We're going to go over, like here's USAID. Can you see that on the screen still? Is that okay? Good. It's too spread out. USAID. Mozambique. Even Mozambique, by the way, that was the Gaza condoms overlap, right? And it says to support Feed the Future improve the resilience of coastal communities, like things that you would probably argue woke and climate resilient. Well, here is Donald Trump's administration giving it $8 million one day after their administration took over. And yes, this is their administration. Or, for example, 2 different times for climate science and prediction. Well, look at that. Look at that. That's Donald Trump's administration on February 7th and 10th, spending $4.5 million for climate science. Oops. Okay, here's one. Expand the markets for climate smart beef, bison, and, just the kind of the same stuff that I'm not even trying to say good or bad. You can decide for yourself, but I think it's interesting. These things are climate smart practices, right? Well, Donald Trump's administration put in $2.3 million 2 days after they took over. Same thing. These are all climate things. I think these were the ones I really wanted to highlight, and that was the overlapping of the mRNA. God, I feel like there's one I want to show you, but I'm trying to rush. There's examples that I will go over tomorrow in here. Like I already showed one where they're showing examples that are not actually there. Let's just try to grab one real quickly, actually. I do have a couple more minutes. Just random stuff. Like let's just see with this one right here. And I'll show you how to do this, by the way. So there's your procurement number. Okay, let's go down here to award ID. Add that. Search. Let it load. It'll give you one example, one result for the number. Assuming it doesn't take forever. Of course it does. We'll come back. This is to study the effects of climate change. Look at that. Funded as of February 12th, $200,000. Not a lot, but still being funded. There's the one right there. Okay. So here, this should be terminated if this is actually stopping like they claim down there. Yep, right there. Terminate for convenience. Now, that's what I was going to go over more tomorrow, is examples of ones that are in there that are not, that some of which actually have more funding going into them. These ones are more about that. We're going to get into the bird flu point tomorrow, highlighting that they're still spending money on mRNA research, Trump's administration right up until now. Funding just the point was funding things that show you that they're continuing in the direction, even with Pfizer. Here's Pfizer, Health and Human Services. $1.1 million. Now, sorry to rush off today, guys. I just, what's the term? Other factors. But it's good because it'll give me more time to get into this tomorrow. But overarching point as usual, it looks like we're stream struggling as well. There's a lot of information out there around how many times they've been caught lying. His own AI is now telling you that he's at least 52% of the time spreading misinformation. Just question this stuff, guys. Just stop blindly going along with it if they've been caught this many times. USAID claims for Gaza wrappers, Gaza condoms, the Reuters story in general. They're latching on to things that get you outraged. So you're missing what they're doing to the world, it seems. But we'll get into that more tomorrow. I appreciate you all continuing to support this platform, guys. We would not be here without you. Everything we are is because you believe in what we're doing. You support this platform. So thank you for continuing to do that. And whether you want to continue to support this platform hopefully you do, sending $1 a month or whatever else, or just want to reach out and send us words of encouragement, it means the world to us. And those of you that have gotten our handwritten responses know we do our best to get back to everybody. But it means everything to me to get something that I can hold, that I can read, that I can digest, that's not electronic, right? So reach out. Let us know what you're thinking. Send us a card, send us anything, send us your thoughts on what I should be covering. We're here for you. I love you all. Thank you for being here. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.